Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon solar eclipse in the third decan of Aries. I hope that you're doing well out there. Happy Friday afternoon. Seeing some nice friends stopping in the chat today. If you are just stopping in and wanting to spend a few hours with us today, drop a little line in the chat. Tell me where you're stopping in from. I always love seeing your faces and where you're coming from at all of the corners of the world here. I'm just going to welcome some of my friends here. Hello, Jody, tuning in from South Florida. Nice to see you, friend. Rachel Fletcher is here from Roanoke, Virginia. Tarja and Ranta is here, I believe, from Finland. And more of you are stopping by and putting things in the chat here today. So, friends, today we are going to talk about the new moon solar eclipse. We are going to break it down. We're going to look at the host. We're going to look at major aspects, other things I'm noticing. There's mutual reception with Mercury and Venus. We've got a couple out of bounds planets. We have a Mercury that's stationing, about to go retrograde right after that. So I will try to break all those things down for you. I'll give you a little preview of the third decan of Aries. I will talk a little bit about the second decan of Cancer today and show you a little bit of a mini piece of the slides of the decans of Cancer, because I think that's going to be a big part of our story. We've got a number of fixed star placements that this eclipse is going to be touching on. So we're going to be talking about the fixed star El Resha today. Venus will be on Aldebaran. Saturn's going to be on Fomalhaut. And Mars is going to be pretty close to the fixed star Sirius. So we'll try to at least touch on those things. What else are we going to do? And what I'm going to do as well is take the eclipse through the houses like I did with the Jupiter Cazimi. There will be some similar themes because the Cazimi is happening in a similar place as the new moon eclipse that's happening next week. So there's going to be some repetition there, but I think there's enough things different that you can find out where you may be experiencing a new start, experiencing a turning off of one of the lights, so to speak, which is kind of interesting. The sun is kind of having the light switch turned off for a little bit here, which can be disorientating, but also can allow us to achieve certain things that we might not usually be able to do when we are working from our ego, I think is part of the issue that we're dealing with. So we'll try to break that down as well. A couple things that I would like to announce before we just dive into the chart here. The Decans of Aries is still on sale. The webinar that I did with the fixed stars, the tarot, the mythology, you can find that in the description of this video at the store on my website, spencermichaud.com. It's going to be on sale until the end of Aries season, which is coming up. We're going to get, 2 Taurus season right after this eclipse. So you have roughly a little less than a week to save 20% on that. The other thing that I'm very excited about that I hope that you'll join me for is our guided group study spring 2023 session. We're going to be doing Sophie Strand's Flowering Wand book, The Flowering Wand. Really excited about this book. It is an amazing piece of work where we are going over a lot of mythology, history, ecology. We are looking at the possibilities of connecting myth with astrology, and also finding ways to update some of the myths for the time and place that we are living in currently, which I think is really important. It's an important skill as an astrologer. I'm going to do my best with this book to be able to connect it to charts that we're going to look at during class, to connect it to astrological themes. It's not necessarily an astrology book, but a lot of times we need to branch out outside of our technical astrological comfort zone to be able to bring some life experience to our clients, to our lives. And I think that understanding myth and understanding how to make those type of connections and to communicate those very important spiritual concepts is one of the best things that you can learn how to do as an astrologer and a diviner of any sort. So I'm excited about this book. We'll kind of start building what I like to call mycelial astrology and start looking at the connections, much like we do on this channel here, where we're looking at the guest host relationships. We're looking at the fruiting body of a mushroom or a planet in a certain house, and then connecting it with its mycelial network of the planet that is hosting it and the aspectual relationships that other planets are making to it. So I'm excited about this. We're going to have a Discord group. We meet every other Monday in the afternoon, Eastern time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we have some really great discussions. We usually go about 2 hours or so, and they'll be recorded if you miss it. So that's starting Monday, the 17th. I hope to see you all there. If you are having some problems with like tax season or something, there are payment plans available upon request as well. I'm happy to work with you to work something out with that. I know that this time of year is a little like, oh no, what's going on with taxes and stuff. But I hope you'll join me for that. And we've had a really great group the last couple times, and have just really bonded really nicely. And I just love what people bring to the table with their own experiences and their own ability to look at charts and have great discussions. So again, if you're looking for a positive, supportive community, a safe space to practice astrology and to learn more about myth and divination, I think this is the place for you. So there's a link to that in the description of this video. And again, the easiest thing you can do to support the work I'm doing here today is to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, turn on the notification bell, sign up for the newsletter if you're new and you want to hear about new announcements, about things that are coming down the pike. If you want to make a material donation to the work I'm doing, there's a little $sign where you can buy a super chat or a super sticker, and that is helping to support the work that I do. Or you can buy one of these webinars. I mean, that's kind of, it helps me to keep the lights on here, and you get to learn about astrology. So everybody wins. Okay, friends, I'm welcoming a few more folks here. Sorry, advertising part of the show is done. This is the reality of our capitalist society, that we have to, toot our own horn every once in a while if we're self-employed. So forgive me for that. But I do hope that you will join me, because I am excited about these offerings. Leanne Rogers is here from the UK. It's your Jupiter return today. Well, Leanne, welcome. And I hope that Zeus blesses you with abundance. Sabrina Luna is here dropping by. Happy Friday. Hello, Sabrina. Nice to see you as well, my friend. Okay. Should we dive in? Let's see what we've got going on here. And don't be shy if if you're kind of lurking in the background today listening. I always love seeing you in the chat and seeing what you have to say. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about the eclipse. Remember, we're going to go through the eclipse house by house. So if you have a specific house question, recognize that I will get to that. Again, we'll probably go a couple hours today. You know me, I'm a slow burn, but I think that's a lost art in this society. I think that the Taurus part of me is like, let's just take our time and unfold and just let the natural process unfold. Jeannie is here. It says advertising is fine. Well, thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate it. Again, it's a necessary evil in modern times, and I appreciate you, giving me the thumbs up on that. It's not the most comfortable thing for a Cancerian type person to do those types of things, so I appreciate you holding space for me for that. Lynn McMillan is here. Hi from hot Vermont. Yes, Lynn. It is hot Michigan right now too. This is why I don't have the ubiquitous green hoodie on today. It's because it's just too damn hot. It's like 85 degrees up here, and it's too early in the season for me to bust out the air conditioners yet. So I've just got a fan going in the background. Hopefully that's not too loud, and we'll sweat it out together with this Aries new moon solar eclipse. I mean, of course we're going to be hot when we're talking about this, right? Okay. Michelle is joining us from Charleston, South Carolina. Hello, Michelle. Nice to see you. KP1231 is stopping in also. Hi, everybody. Cleveland in the house. All right. Thanks for the great astrology, listening at work, and it makes the day a lot better. Oh, good. I'm glad that we can be a little bit of a break from maybe the monotony of a work day on a Friday afternoon and get you all ready for the weekend. All right. Okay, friends, let's talk about the astrology here today. Let's dive right into it. If you couldn't tell, I'm wearing some Mercury and Gemini oil today, so maybe there's a little extra chattiness going on. Some really great stuff from Caitlin Kopic over at Sphere and Sundry. I really like the frog sub-series that she put out. Yeah, I'm just really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying kind of feeling a little more lighthearted with everything. She does great work. So support her at Sphere and Sundry. Support Tanya at Third Coast Mojo as well. So many great magical practitioners out there, and a lot of great magical materia is out in the world right now. Thank you so much, Michelle, for your super sticker. I appreciate you. Okay, so we're talking eclipse season. This is a big chapter marker. This is a time period where we are going to be closing one chapter and opening a new one. It is a period of time where we feel slightly disorientated sometimes. Oftentimes, when one of the lights eclipses the other, something is kind of momentarily shut off. In this case, the sun is going to be momentarily blocked out by the new moon. So it's going to darken the sun. This is a condition that back in ancient times, people were pretty nervous about. They were like, oh my goodness, this life-giving God, the sun, is being swallowed by a demon, okay, or by a dragon. We have eclipses happen when we either have a full moon or a new moon that are very close to the nodes of the moon. So here we're going to have a new moon solar eclipse that's very close to the north node. Even though the north node is in Taurus, it is very, very close to this eclipse. So we have Rahu involved in this eclipse. Rahu is a name for the north node in Eastern astrology or Jyotisha, Vedic astrology, which was a hungry dragon or demon that the story goes basically that wanted to consume the elixir of life, of immortality, wanted to become immortal. And that was a big no-no. So one of the other deities had a big sword and like chopped his head off, but he had already swallowed, Rahu had already swallowed a little bit of that elixir of life. So he didn't die. So there is some feelings with Rahu in particular about hunger, right? About desire, about wanting to consume something. In Western Hellenistic astrology, they talk about the north node as a point of increase, whereas the south node, or K2, is a point of decrease. In that same story, K2 is the severed body, like the snake-like body that doesn't have a head. It's like processing old things. It's like think of K2 as sort of like the anus of the universe, or just getting rid of stuff that we don't need anymore. So this might be a time period where we're feeling a lot of desires, where we are hungry for something that is difficult to get satiated. And when we have a new moon solar eclipse in Aries, we might be feeling like we want independence, that we want personal sovereignty, that we want to be supported for our own personal vision. Although I will say there's a little bit of a mixture of elements going on here, because the eclipse itself is at 29 degrees of Aries. The north node is at about 4 degrees of Taurus. So we may, Rahu may be desiring material security potentially with the north node in Taurus and wanting to make plans. So we have to kind of combine those elements a little bit of this eclipse. So one thing that we can take with that's part of the big picture that we're looking at before we dive into the details. We are trying to make a new start. We had a really important new start this past Tuesday with the Jupiter Cazimi, and if you are here and joined me for the live stream, you will remember that a lot of the themes that we talked about related to the Four of Wands. This is a Venus-ruled decan where we are trying to gain a following. We're trying to sell something. Like for me personally, I'm like, trying to adorn my offerings in maybe a slightly seductive way, or in a way that will bring people over to my point of view. Okay. You can think about this in your own life of something that you are trying to get people on board with. And at certain times, we have to learn how to shift our delivery to be able to get people to get on board with it, right? I mean, sorry to be repetitive about that, but I think it's the spirit that's associated with this decan is Eros. You remember Eros was a little cherub that had gold-tipped arrows, that when you were struck with one of these arrows, you became inflamed with the desire. He also carried lead-tipped arrows, though. So we have to be careful that the arrows that we're shooting are ones that can attract people, or that we're not shooting these lead-tipped arrows that will drive people away. This could also be part of this eclipse energy. The other thing that we're looking at with this eclipse is that the sun is going to be the planet that is turned off, quote unquote. So there may be some challenges with self-expression. There may be some challenges with our ego, right? If we think about that in a maybe a cliched way, like the sun representing will, individuality, being an individual point of consciousness, it may require us to maybe turn off the ego for a period of time so that we can achieve what we want to achieve. There may be some possibilities with this eclipse where we are trying to reduce our self-interest, Aries, to be able to achieve a particular goal. Now, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. Eclipses will play out over a period of many months. They're also part of a larger cycle, like I believe like an 18-year cycle as well. So you can look back in time and see when an eclipse happened in this area of the zodiac in your own life and try to figure out what was going on in your life. And it's good to make those connections. The form will change, but the essence might be similar. So I think that this is a really important transitional time. We have an I-Ching reading here today that I'll get into in a minute, but the I-Ching spoke about that kind of need to think larger. And I don't mean larger in a self-interest type of way, but being able to take a more of a objective viewpoint where you are releasing self-interest to be able to achieve something that is worthy, that is in alignment with integrity, without necessarily, having to get something from it, right? I think that this sometimes can limit our involvement in really good projects is when we feel like we need to get something personally out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't, take care of ourselves. It doesn't mean that we have to become a martyr. It doesn't mean that we have to always have our energy consumed, I guess, by others and their goals. But I do think that sometimes there are things that we can achieve where if we release the need to think about our self-interest, we can actually get involved in something that can be very beneficial, not only for our communities, but for ourselves. I think that this is a thing that we fail to recognize sometimes is when our communities are healthy, when we're involved in projects that are healthy rather than toxic, everybody wins. And it's really hard to benefit when we are only trying to be an island and we're trying to do everything that just on our own. I've struggled with this. And I think that what I will observe from my own life is oftentimes when we pursue personal sovereignty, and that's really just a fancy word of being able to guide your own ship, being able to have maybe a little bit of control of over your own circumstances, to be able to direct your will in the direction that you choose rather than always having to conform to someone else's vision. I think a lot of the desire that we have for wanting to do that comes from mistrust, comes from trauma, comes from having some really difficult experiences with other people to the point where we're saying, you know what, it's just too much work to relate to other people, to work with other people. I'm just going to do it all on my own. I've been guilty of this in the past. But I do think that there comes a point where you get to the point of diminishing returns where you have to start peeking your head out there and say, how do we create again with one another? How do we reestablish those bridges that will help us to achieve more than we could by ourselves? That's really one of the themes of the fixed star that we're going to see at this degree, 29 degrees of Aries with this eclipse. Al-Resha is the bridge builder. This was the knot that tied together the two fishes in Pisces, the two fish in Pisces, right? One was swimming towards the heavens, the other was swimming along the ecliptic in the mundane world. So how do we tie together our spiritual aspirations with our mundane world, with our physical world? How do we bring people together so that we can achieve more together than we would as individuals? This might be some of the themes that we're discussing over the next few months. Okay, I'm just going to check in. So that's kind of a bigger picture meditation that I've been having on this. I'm going to check in with the chat here. Rachel is here. It says, hi from Ireland, all so ready for a new chapter. The eclipse will be opposite my natal moon in the 4th house. Might be interesting. Oh boy, that's a good point, Rachel. When we have eclipses that are angular, and angular houses are 1, 10, 7, and 4, we will probably feel them more intensely than we would if they were in any of the other houses that were cadent or succedent. Angular houses are very personal. So if you're seeing this eclipse, and if you're a Capricorn, Cancer, Libra, or Aries rising, you're probably going to feel this eclipse more intensely as a personal experience rather than seeing it happen around you. It doesn't mean that we won't experience the eclipse and have personal feelings about it if it's not in an angular house. It just means that it may be off to the side. Like it may be happening to a partner, it may be happening to a neighbor, it may be happening, in a workplace instead of to us personally. So that's one thing to consider and keep an eye out for. Yeah, Michelle, I forgot we have like all the Capricorn risings here today. So Michelle says this falls in my 4th house where I have a natal Saturn, Chiron, and North Node. North Node currently transiting my 5th house. Yeah. So Rachel, Michelle, I feel for you. You have this is an angular eclipse. So it will be an important chapter marker for your 4th house. And I will get to that. I'll try to unpack that for you as we go along today. Jürgen is here from Berlin. Hello, Jürgen. Lovely to be here, man. I'm an Aries rising. Oh, so you have it in the 1st house. So another angular rising here for this eclipse. My degree is at 29. Oh my goodness, Jürgen. Woo! This is going to be a big one for you, friend. Having an eclipse right on a natal angle is going to be very important. So I will try to break that down for you when I dive into the Aries rising part of the show. So stick around, friend. Dawn is here from Mobile, Alabama. Nice to see you, Dawn. Welcome, friend. Krista DeMayo is here. Says, hi, Spencer. Sending love from Asheville. And also thankful as a fixed rising to see an eclipse not in my 1st and 7th. Although I know we're not quite done yet. Just talking about what I can take and what I can get. Yes, Krista, as a Leo rising, fixed rising, I hear you. It will be nice not to have an eclipse hanging out with us. Although you're right, we've got one more coming in May. This one's going to be, right on my natal moon. The sun will be on my natal moon. So we'll see what happens with that. We survived. We survived this one. These last ones, we'll survive these next ones. But yes, if you're a cardinal rising sign, buckle up, friend. Yeah, Lynn's another Cap rising. Rachel says, these eclipses in Aries and Libra have been historically very important phases of change for me. Thanks, Spencer. Enjoying the insights. All right, good. Well, hopefully we will be able to unpack some more secrets. Okay. So keep those good comments coming. If you have any questions, make sure you put them in the chat. Do me a favor, if you have a specific question, just put it all caps in front of it and say question. That helps me to see if it's a comment or a question. I love reading your comments, but I want to make sure I hit the questions as well. Okay, let me show you something very quickly here. So I'm going to look at the chart just briefly, and then we'll break down some of the decan parts of it. Okay, and I'll go back and forth between the chart and my decans webinar slides. So first of all, we're looking at the new moon solar eclipse, April 20th, 2023, which is a Thursday, very early in the morning on Thursday, on the east coast of the United States. And you can see we have 29 degrees, sun, moon, and Jupiter is co-present, as well as Chiron in this particular chart. Not super close to Chiron, so I don't know if that's something to necessarily get worked up about. We have Mars hosting from 13 degrees of Cancer, and I'll talk about that in a second. We have Venus sextile, okay, not by degree, but by whole sign. So there is a benefic that is, both benefics actually are trying to help. even though we do have the square from a malefic planet in Mars. Saturn's really not super in the conversation with this one. But what is in the conversation, I think, is we do have a mutual reception between Venus and Mercury. So what that means is that they are exchanging homes. It's sort of like a home share, like a vacation home exchange, if you want to think of it like that. Venus is in Mercury's sign, and Mercury is in Venus's sign. So that means that they have some kind of secret affinity for one another. They're able to exchange some resources, even though they're in aversion to one another in this chart. Mercury is important in this chart, I think, not because it is aspecting the new moon itself, but because it is slowing way down and about to go under the beams of the sun later in the day, and it is going to station retrograde the day after. So Mercury is slowing down. We're going to get some messages. We're going to probably have some things that we're going to have to review in the Taurus area of our chart. So if we think about that in the context of the eclipse, it says that we're probably, even though we want things to happen quickly with an Aries new moon, we're probably going to have to wait and see the process unfold, I think is part of it. The other thing I will say about Venus is it's on Aldebaran at 10 degrees of Gemini, which is a fixed star, royal fixed star. There's two royal fixed star placements in this chart, which I think is very interesting. Venus is on Aldebaran, and Saturn is on Fomalhaut. So we may be trying to make a dream real with Saturn on Fomalhaut. We may be trying to improve our delivery of things through our own charisma, through our own abilities to craft our life through our imagination, our creative imagination. We may be tapping into our own wizard qualities, our own sorceress qualities. But again, with Saturn there, we're having to be realistic about how we utilize our charisma. We're having to maybe release some of the dreams that aren't shown to be practical, but also some things might be concretizing. Venus on Aldebaran, that is Venus in the second decan of Gemini. Aldebaran is the eye of the bull in Taurus, whereas Fomalhaut was the mouth of the southern fish, not the Pisces fish, but the southern fish that Aquarius is pouring its sweet water into, its purified water into. So these were both Persian royal fixed stars that marked out the cross of matter, the equinoxes and the solstices. So because of precession, they are now in the mutable signs, but they were originally marking out the seasons in the fixed signs. So Fomalhaut was related to Aquarius and Aldebaran related to Taurus. So if you think about some of those themes, that can give you another layer as well. The Aldebaran part is maybe about creating abundance, but doing it through the necessity of maintaining integrity. There's a story that Bernadette Brady talks about in her fixed star book, her really good fixed star book, by the way. What is it called? I don't know. It's her larger fixed star book. I'm trying to find it. The big book of fixed stars or something like that. And she talks about the myth of Ahura Mazda, who was a great general who was very disciplined and required his soldiers to be very orderly and disciplined and to work with integrity. So she grasps onto that mythological story to speak to the need to maintain our integrity at all costs when we have a planet that is hanging out on Aldebaran. So if you are trying to gain a following with the eclipse in Aries III, you're going to have to do it in a way that is in alignment with your integrity. You're probably not going to be able to take shortcuts. If you're thinking of doing something unethical, that can come back to bite you in the butt, right? Just as Fomalhaut can come back to bite you if you're using your charisma for unethical purposes or for selfish purposes. Bernadette Brady really leans into a particular nemesis, she calls it, with the royal fixed stars, where the royal fixed stars will grant great power, great wealth, great abundance, if you avoid the nemesis that she describes. Aldebaran, being integrity and maintaining your integrity, not lying, okay, not like breaking the law or something like that. Having mental discipline. Fomalhaut, using your charisma for the good of all rather than for the selfish purposes. Regulus is about avoiding pursuit of power and authority at all costs, and avoiding feelings of revenge. And then Antares, the fixed star in Sagittarius that is in the heart of the Scorpion, speaks to obsessiveness, right? Like getting so fixated on a goal or so fixated on some kind of obsession that we just run roughshod over other folks. So those are things to think about with those fixed stars. And again, I think this is a really big eclipse, partially because we have so many fixed star stories really a part of the chart here. Okay. Oh, Julene is here. Hello, Julene. Nice to see you. Natal Jupiter conjunct Aldebaran here. Okay, so you probably know about this integrity part, I'm guessing. so you have a nice Venus on your Jupiter, Julene, in this eclipse. So it might be testing that integrity, but that could bring you some positive things. I guess my recommendation, Julene, would be let the good things come to you with Venus hanging out there, rather than feeling like you need to necessarily take action on that. That can be a challenge for Jupiter in Gemini, is feeling like we have to pursue so many different pathways. And when Venus is in Gemini, sometimes we let those options come to us, right? It's okay to explore things when we have Venus in Gemini, but we want to be able to hold dualities as well within that and say, okay, let's explore for the specific purpose of figuring out which one of these things is our highest priority. I think that's a secret secret skeleton key for utilizing Gemini energy correctly. Is it is exploratory, it is expansive, it can be lighthearted, although I think that there is we focus a little bit too much on the childlike qualities of Gemini. I actually find that because Gemini is the 12th house of the Thema Mundi, there's actually quite a bit of heaviness in that sign, also secret heaviness. But I think a lot of it is through our internal state of mind and the feelings that come with a fear of missing out. I think that can be a really heavy energy that doesn't feel innocent or childlike at all. It feels like, oh my goodness, these choices are life or death. So be careful with that. So those are the two royal fixed stars that we're dealing with. Alresha. Now I'm going to stop my share for a second and just kind of talk about Alresha for a second, and I'll come back to the host Mars in a minute. But I wanted to show you, for those of you who are interested, this is a little piece of the Decans of Aries webinar. I hope that you can see that. These are webinars that I did in 2022. I think I started them in 2021 and ended in 2022. And really just a consolidation of a lot of my different explorations, my own Venus and Gemini explorations. I have Venus in the second decan of Gemini, so trying to connect all these different stories and systems into something coherent is another Gemini quality. So Aries 3, you can see here we've got a Venus-ruled decan where we are trying to refine our delivery after establishing our sense of self, our sense of personal sovereignty in the second decan. And then we're saying, okay, here's a little oasis. Here's a little Rivendell on the journey to Mordor, if you want to utilize a Lord of the Rings metaphor. A little stopping point where we can celebrate what we've achieved, but we have to not make assumptions that now we've made it and we don't have to keep working. Because, folks, one of the things I didn't mention about this eclipse is that pretty much the same day after the eclipse happens, the sun moves into Taurus and it squares Pluto in Aquarius. So that Pluto square, that sun square Pluto, is going to be part of this story. And I'll break that down in a second. But that, to me, in addition to the Mercury retrograde in Taurus, speaks to some challenges with our sense of security, of having to dig into the work, of having to put that shovel in the ground and dig up the grass so you can plant your native pollinators, Spencer. It's just, I've been, if you've been following along on the channel, I've been talking a lot about my ideal of this beautiful pollinator habitat. I've even gone so far as to design it on Canva and see a vision of it. But now we're getting closer to the point where the rubber meets the road. I've been doing a few things. I actually got outside and got my new electric chainsaw out and cut up some of the old brush to make room for things. I still have some more work to do with that. But the time is coming where I'm going to have to make some choices about where things are going to go. I'm going to have to just put that shovel in the ground and start doing the hard, hot, sweaty work to get those plants in there. And what I'm being constantly reminded, of by my beautiful partner and friends is that it's not going to look like the Martha Stewart garden magazine picture overnight. A garden is a commitment. It's a long-term commitment. It takes patience. Sometimes it takes many seasons for a garden to flourish. And the patience is required. Yeah, so Jolene says, slow your roll then. Yes, exactly. We're going to have to slow our roll a little bit, potentially. We may be really excited about an idea with all this Aries energy, with the double new moon in Aries. We already had a new moon in Aries. Now it's a second new moon, but a supercharged new moon with the eclipse in Aries 3, right? It's different decans of Aries. But then the reality sets in. Once we figure out what our passion is, then we have to infuse that passion into the physical world, into a body. This is the transition from Aries to Taurus, is how do we take that passionate idea and make it real and ground it? And anytime we take spirit fire and we turn it into physical earthy form, it slows down. It requires working with the rules of incarnation. And as much as we want a plant or anything, a project, to grow quickly, it is subject to the rules of physical incarnation and reality. And sometimes there are also sidetracks that come through. There are also challenges that come up. There are also rocks in the soil that block the roots from reaching the surface. Sometimes there's nasty weather that breaks one of the branches of the trees that we've been trying to cultivate and make beautiful. Sometimes, like I have a boxwood. I don't like the boxwoods, to be honest with you. I think they're really boring bushes. Like they were put in before I put in there. But one of our boxwoods got smashed to smithereens by a giant maple branch that fell during the ice storm. And there's like a big chunk of it that's missing. So sometimes you have to figure out how to reshape a bush. Maybe you take the bush out, completely. Maybe there's something that got smashed and you didn't like it very much in the first place, and you replace it with something else. And I'm speaking metaphorically for things in your life as well. Sometimes there's things that we can't predict that will slow things down in this lifetime, in this process. So again, that's part of the story here. And I think that we'll see that and we'll feel that very intensely at the full moon lunar eclipse that will manifest in a few weeks after this, because that's over the Taurus and Scorpio axis and the fixed signs, which really does sometimes show us the challenges of physicality and things that we need to release before we can move forward with our abundance. Okay, so just briefly again, I'll go through this quicker. If you want a deeper dive into Aries 3, check out my Jupiter Kazemi recording that I did live last week. But the questions you can ask yourself again with this eclipse. How can you tap into your personal magnetism to motivate or attract? How can you use diplomacy or tact to get what you want? How can you celebrate who you've become? What methods might inspire people to see things your way? Is this relationship permanent or a torrid affair? And how can you gather strength for the long road ahead? Okay, so we will shift that a little bit because Jupiter Kazemi really is a new start for Jupiter. That was last week. And Jupiter is a planet that requires, I think, from what I've taken in with Jupiter, honorable conduct and maybe even action that's inspired through will. So last week, my advice for you was maybe try to take a new action about getting people on board with your vision. Many of these questions that we've talked about. Now, the difference this week with this eclipse that's coming up next Thursday, early Thursday, is that the sun is going to be just completely shut off. It's going to be eclipsed by our emotional desire to have people on board with our vision. That's very different than the exalted sun, right? And there's other factors involved that we'll break down in a second. Okay, and as I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, the I-Ching is pretty clear about widening your vision to not have it just be your own personal vision, okay? To be able to take into account the needs of others, to be able to take into account the integrity of what you are doing, not just how it could benefit you. Very important. What is the value of what you are doing rather than what is the value it can bring to you? The value of the thing itself, doing it for the sake of doing it. That's a tough one. That's a hard thing to do, especially in Western culture, and where we are, by necessity, forced to compete with one another daily for attention, for resources, for survival in this late stage capitalism, where we're put into very difficult circumstances, and oftentimes we really do have to fight for scraps that the billionaires will let us have so that we don't revolt and rebel and, cut off their heads, basically. So I get it. I understand the need to want to be self-protected and want to look out for your own interests. But I do think as we move forward into the air age, and I say the air age as related to, I'm not going to call it the age of Aquarius. I don't necessarily think it's that, and I don't like that description of it. I think it's more of the Saturn-Jupiter cycle, the elemental cycle of air, where you see those conjunctions every 200-ish years in a new element, where we are going to have to think about things a little bit more communally. What I will say about the age of Aquarius, even though I think that has been misused by astrologers in the past, I do think that there is some validity in that if we look at it as part of the Pluto cycle. We can think of generations in Pluto cycles, and we are heading into the Pluto Aquarius generation cycle. And that requires us to think like an Aquarian, to think like a Saturnian Aquarian, not necessarily a Uranian Aquarian, although your mileage may vary with that. I think you can find some value in seeing it from both perspectives. I would say that if you are looking at it from a Uranian perspective, the story of Prometheus really resonates with me on that. Having to do something and give a gift to society, and then potentially suffering for it, or not even thinking of your self-interest. Prometheus, and this I think Prometheus is a good guide for this eclipse. Prometheus gave fire to humanity in a fennel stalk and was punished by Zeus and tied to a rock and had his liver eaten by a vulture or an eagle, and it had it regenerate every day to experience that suffering over and over and over again. And it wasn't just the trick that Zeus was upset about, because he was tricked by Prometheus. Like there was something about the good portion of meat or went to humanity, and then like the bones and the skin or something went to Zeus. I'm trying to remember that myth correctly. I'm probably butchering it. But part of that myth that is important is that Hermes, Mercury, keeps coming to Prometheus every day and is like, hey, if you just kind of like admit you're wrong or like apologize or something like that, Zeus will let you go. And Prometheus was like, never, never. I know I'm right, and I will sit chained to this rock for eternity before I admit that to Zeus. So there is like this like stubbornness to Prometheus about knowing that they're doing the right thing. And eventually he's released by Chiron. Chiron's like, look, bud, you have to keep dying on this hill every day. Like I really want to die because I've got this, this injury that I can't heal. Just please let me die. You'd be doing us both a solid. So I think that that to me is fairly interesting. Okay, so that's the Aries 3 decanic part of this. Let's stop the share here. I'm just going to look through the chat real quick to see if there's any questions about that part. Actually, before we move on, let's actually go back and look at Alresha real quickly, because that is actually part of the decans of Aries webinar too. We can see Eros is the spirit, and I talked about the golden and the lead-tipped arrows, inflaming or desire or having it be rejected through the lead tip. Alresha is in the constellation Pisces. You could see that it is tying together the two fish. Okay, one fish is ascending towards the heavens. The other is swimming along the ecliptic, or the plane of, I guess we could call it the plane of matter. They call it the sacred knot. So we're talking about bringing ideas and people together, balancing our material needs and our spiritual needs, appreciating diversity, strong networking skills. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot in my personal experience of being an astrologer, of trying to navigate between, personal sovereignty and working with others on projects. I've had a lot of experience working with others in the past, but I have a little bit of like, I don't know. Sometimes I'll feel like I'll get involved in some project and then I'll feel like I'm kind of getting taken advantage of. Maybe this is Venus in the 11th house in a day chart, an out of sect Venus. So, and I know that this is something that I have to overcome and start working with people that I trust, because there's some really great people out there, and I've had a lot of invitations to do some things, and I feel like on some level I've been saying no almost too much. So maybe in your life there may be something where you can maybe release the need to have it be so much of an individual endeavor and join together with someone that you appreciate and that you trust, and just it is a risk doing that, right? We're risking our security, we're risking our safety, and sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to peek our head outside of the comfort zone. Mars in Cancer, okay, and pursue something outside of our own little bubble. And I know that that's painful for people, and I know that sometimes that's scary. I again, as we are coming off a very difficult few years where we really have been required, I think, to have distance between one another, not just physically, but there was probably some spiritual differences or distance as we've, observed how people act in crisis situations through their own trauma, through their own attempts to discern what is real and what is not. That's difficult to do. And I empathize with people who are trying to figure out what is real and what isn't anymore. I feel like it's much more difficult to do that than almost any time in history. And we all react to that in slightly different ways, and that can breed mistrust with one another. We literally have algorithms on the internet that are designed to create conflict with one another. They are literally keeping us in echo chambers where we just cannot possibly hear one another in a way that is healthy. We also have giant corporations that thrive on making people scared, that thrive on getting people's attention by any means necessary. that want to make us feel less than so that they can sell us something. And that's really difficult to parse through. Okay. And I think that a lot of times people who are well-meaning will sometimes go to their own extremes because of a fear. And I'm not innocent of this. I sometimes have allowed my own fear to take me in a direction that I had to, I had to kind of like back off of it, or I had to get a reality check. I had to check in with people. Still, personally, just struggling with, how do we transition back into being together with one another on a physical level? That's something that's been weighing heavily on my mind as we see that we've ended, quote unquote, ended the COVID emergency in the United States, even though there is still transmission happening and people getting COVID and people sick and people still in the hospital dying. It's hard to know who and what to trust. So this fixed star Al-Resha might help us to build some of those bridges back again. Help us maybe peek our little heads out of our crab shells and start communicating with one another and start building new bridges with the new reality that we live within. Many astrologers over the past few years spoke about that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction as a new era, okay? A new reality. The new normal was the cliche at the time. And I do think that the pandemic was something that shook us out of, or attempted to shake us out of, an old reality. We are being tasked with Pluto moving into Aquarius now with, did we pass the initial test with that? Some people did, some people aren't. Many of us have tried to go back to the way that the Earth age functioned. Many of us are trying to make sense of what the air age is going to bring us. We have things like AI technology advancing very rapidly, which will be part of our reality very, very quickly if it is not already part of your reality. There are going to be changes on how we interact with one another, what it means to be human. There might need to be changes with how we treat the air in our indoor spaces, air quality. Those are some things I've been seeing that people are really committing to, is how do we filter out the air and make those indoor spaces healthy to get back together in a way that isn't going to give people a debilitating disease long term. Those are all questions that we have to ask ourselves. The other questions we're asking ourselves is, how are we going to band together to be able to change the way we utilize our resources so that we can survive on this planet long term as we face very difficult changing weather patterns, climate change, all of those things? How are we going to support one another instead of hoarding, right? We're going to have to rely on one another, especially in times of crisis. So all of these things that Al-Resha can speak to, the sum being greater than the parts, building those social bridges, getting back to those strong networking skills, recognizing that you really aren't an island and that you need other people. Okay, human beings are very social creatures. It can be very unhealthy to be isolated. That being said, there is still a need to balance out your participation in groups, your need to compromise with people, with your own individual desires and needs, with your own individual, character. It's all about balance, right? It's all about balance. And I think that what I aspire to on this channel and in life is an equilibrium. I think that a lot of the most toxic things that we experience in life come from any extreme position. I think when we go to extremes, that's when things are not stable, all right? Now, I know for a lot of people, stability isn't necessarily the goal. And there are certain folks where it's important sometimes to be, I guess, a shit stirrer, or else nothing would ever change. Sometimes we can get too complacent. But again, I am a proponent of the middle way and the middle path. And I think that we can make changes that are healthy when we strive for balance and equilibrium. Looking through the chat, I'm going to stop my share and look at this chat. Julene says, totally makes sense. No man is an island. Two halves don't make a whole. I think the astrology emulates themes around how we fit into the bigger picture. Can we help each other? Stuff like that, especially. Yes, Julene. And she says, just as the nodes go into Aries and Libra. Exactly. So that's a great point. We're going to have the North Node shifting into Aries and the South Node shifting into Libra shortly after this eclipse, like within probably, I believe, a month or so of this eclipse. We will, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to pursue Aries North Node things. Oftentimes in modern astrology, especially evolutionary astrology, sorry, evolutionary astrologers, I think that there's some good things to evolutionary astrology, but I think there's also some challenges that I don't necessarily agree with. We don't have to pursue the North Node at all times. We have to balance out the energy of the North Node and the South Node, in my personal opinion. I think that what the North Node moving into Aries will do is it might increase our desire, much like Rahu, the demon that wanted to swallow the elixir of immortality, our desires to be individuals and to have our own personal power and sovereignty. But it might bring us situations, South Node, where we have to deal with partnerships. We have to deal with old challenges and karma related to compromise. There may be situations that are coming to us from past lifetimes or whatever it is. I don't know how they think about that. Like I believe that they think about that in evolutionary astrology as South Node, past life things, North Node moving towards things. Maybe. I'm not the ultimate authority on that. But I do think that everything in the chart, this is something I echo my astrology teacher from Nightlight Astrology, Mr. Ellenboss. Everything in the chart is, I think, a result of maybe possibly past karma and decisions that we're making in real time as well. So it's not just the South Node that is your past. It's everything in the chart is a result of like previous choices in your life now, maybe even in another life. Can I say that with spiritual authority? Nope. But I think it's an interesting idea. Very, very Venus and Gemini of me. Like, it's a great idea. Do I know for sure? Nah. Like, but I do think that we are experiencing a desire for individuality, but we don't want to go to extremes. Like, remember that North Node can get us in trouble. I mean, I want you to think about this. Look at the North Node in your chart and think about how if you follow that desire to its extreme, some of the challenges that you've run into in your life. Because I know for me, North Node and Leo in the first house, if I follow my Leonine impulses and only think about myself and not the other, that gets me in a lot of trouble. Okay, so it's not just like, oh, you're gonna be this bright, shiny lion. Okay, no, to me, it is balanced out by thinking about, am I going to utilize the ability to capture a spotlight or a point of attention for communal goals, balancing it with the South Node in Aquarius. To me, I was very uncomfortable being in the spotlight for a long time, for being visible, to the point where when I was 8 years old, friends, my mom, bless her heart, it was the 1 year anniversary of her passing this week. So that's been something I've been processing. But she was a very experimental person. She was very social, very social. She was a Gemini sun, loved her community, her friends. And she pushed little 8-year-old Spencer to go into a restaurant, like just some fast food place, and make the order myself. And I was so hell bent on, because I didn't want anybody to look at me. I didn't like having anybody even look at me, let alone like having to be a focal point of attention. I was very shy as a child. And I remember this because she's like, you got to go in and do this. You got to, utilize your will to make a choice and, get pushed out of the nest. And sometimes when we do that, we build confidence, right? And I think that was a formative experience for me. And now, as far as the work that I do here, I hope that we're utilizing this, attention to further communal goals. So I want you to think about that with the nodes, especially with this nodal eclipse as well. Because let's go back to the chart. And if you're a Leo North Node, I don't want to make this Leo specific, but I think it's an interesting way of thinking about the nodes. Many of you Leo North Nodes out there, you may be more inclined to be more visible if you know that what you're promoting or what you are becoming visible for is for the good of the whole. I know that for me, that really motivated me. When I started this channel, I felt like it was much more in alignment with helping people rather than, I did my music career and that helped people and I was teaching, but this feels like a different level of that. And it really is motivating to be able to be of service and to utilize your platform for service. Michelle says, hope you're doing okay, Spencer. My mom's been in and out of hospice the last couple of years, so I know that's coming from me too. I'm sorry, Michelle. I'm doing okay. There's always feelings that have come up and processing feelings, and I empathize with all of you out there who are going through this. If you're at a similar age demographic of me, my mom was pretty young, actually. She was only 62, but as we get into our 40s, 50s, 60s, our parents are aging and we have to learn to let go. Some of us had to let go at a very young age. It is challenging, and it is, I guess the thing that has been coming up for me is appreciating that person and their life, but also having gratitude for the people that are in your life now. That's something that, those are one of the things that made me break down on this channel, is through thinking of the death of one of my parents, how much I appreciated how my other parent was there and is there for me. So think about who still remains in your life, and cherish that time you have with those folks too, that are still there and that are transitioning, because they need you. They need you to be present. It's very easy to want to check out when a parent is really sick. I was guilty of it a little bit. It was just so painful to watch them suffer that it's easy to want to just have a break from it all and to guard your own heart. But I think the best thing that you can do, Michelle in particular, is to be present for your mom and to be open with your heart in her final days. So I hope that's helpful for you, Michelle. Okay. So we were talking about, we went on a little philosophical digression about the nodes. Okay. Again, we may be desiring physical security at this eclipse. We may be having to process grief. Like this is, Michelle, like you and I both, we're processing grief through this period of time of these eclipses. We're letting go of something that is shedding its form so that that energy, that spirit energy, can be liberated to find new form. So process your grief, face it. Try not to avoid it with this eclipse. For every new beginning that you are going to make, you're letting go of something else, and that's part of the cycle of life. Okay? This is why before I can plant my garden, I need to get rid of the dead wood in the yard, because that dead wood is going to block the fertility of the dirt. I'm not going to be able to plant something like if a big giant tree is fallen in the space I want to put a flower in. But if I cut it up and get it out of the way, I can return some of it to the earth and I can get that dead stuff out of there so that new life can grow. This is something you learn as a bonsai artist and a tree arbor. This was really, really difficult for me to learn. And when I first started doing bonsai, I spent a few months going to a bonsai store in Southeast Michigan and training under some really amazing people that had years of experience doing this. And one of the hardest things to learn in the very beginning was that sometimes for you to create that beautiful shape, you have to cut that tree way back. You have to cut back all what looks like all this life with the specific understanding and faith that it will grow back. Sometimes you're going to cut back that tree and it's going to look just absolutely naked. And that is scary sometimes. But it comes back, and it comes back even more beautiful, and it comes back with even little branches that are creating the illusion of a big tree. It's just something to behold. I find it's really fun. Like, here's an example. I'm going to stop my share for a second because I think this is important with this eclipse and these. Here's a little cherry tree. It's a little cherry bonsai. This, I just trimmed this. It had a huge long, I don't know, branch that was coming off of here, and I had to cut it way back. But you can see already that there's new growth that's happening. There's new growth that's coming in. That big branch, it needed to be cut back to be able to create balance. Do you see what I'm saying? Bonsai is all about balance. It's all about this aesthetic balance. And if you have one big branch, growing in one direction, that's not balance. That's not the beauty of Venus. The balance of Libra comes from that equilibrium and that harmony. Kate says, this bonsai talk reminds me of controlled burning. That's a great point, Kate. Because if it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it, to light a fire in the forest to be able to create life? But that's how the cycles of nature work. We have to sometimes eliminate some of the old matter and release the energy in it so that it can be repurposed. Really difficult for human beings to learn. I think that we just have to grow and grow and grow and then hang on for dear life to any form that we've acquired. And we don't have faith that if we let go and we repurpose that energy and we release the form, that it will find a new form. I mean, we've seen this in physics. Matter can't be created or destroyed, right? Now, maybe there's some new science that argues that, but I think that's still a basic premise of modern science. And I think that there's something really interesting about that. And I've been watching these documentaries about people who have had like experiences with psychedelic mushrooms recently. I haven't gone down that road yet, but I think it's really interesting that they are seeing the connection of all life when they're doing something of that nature, like microdosing or something like that. And I think what they are coming into contact with is that they are energy. They are part of this life cycle. Their bodies will become mushrooms, right? Their bodies will become flowers. And there's a real peace within that. Not that we're going to like ascend to some high spiritual mountain or even in another human body. Maybe part of us becomes another human body. Maybe part of us becomes a tree. Maybe part of us becomes worm food. Maybe part of us becomes another animal that is born out of it. And that to me is the essence of like the oneness that we experience. And I think that that's a really important realization to think about with the axis of Taurus and Scorpio, is that you have to compost those old forms to be able to create new life. Okay. So let's go back to the chart. I'm just going to look at these wonderful comments that are starting to come in. Dawn says, actually, Kate says, yes, I'm ready. Let it burn, baby. Don says, love it. My husband has terrible time with pruning in our garden and in letting go of things in the house. Right, right. I do too. I'm a hoarder. I'm a pack rat. I have an attic full of childhood stuff that I have an emotional attachment to. When you grow up in traumatic circumstances, oftentimes we try to control our external environments. And how do we get to the point where we have enough inner peace to be able to not necessarily have to hang on so tightly to the things that are in our life? Yeah, where people are talking about the curiosity of what happens after this life. Uh-oh, Kate had a Aries meltdown, Kate. Like, um, Julie is here from Denmark. Hello, Julie. Nice to see you. Yeah, Don's asking about Taurus as hoarder. I want to give another shout out to. I've been just really enjoying the insights of Ashley Ellenboss recently. She had another story. She's a double Taurus, and she posted about Taurus. Maybe I'm just resonating with her because we share a Taurus moon. But she talked about Taurus as needing to control their external environment when they're not feeling at peace within themselves. And I can totally relate to that. I can become a absolute tyrant when I'm feeling unsafe. And I've had to really check in with myself and say, why do I want to control these physical circumstances? And it's because I'm feeling out of alignment and not peaceful within my own self. So being able to have some really important self-examination is also part of what the I-Ching was speaking to this particular eclipse. I mean, we got the hexagram number 20, which is viewing your life from a higher perspective. I'll get to the details of that, but oftentimes we need to really self-evaluate. I think the best thing you can do with Aries energy and an eclipse is really look yourself in the mirror and say, how am I creating circumstances where I feel like I have to be independent at all costs? How am I trying to control my own environment with the North Node in Taurus? And how do I start moving forward where I can maybe inch my way back into community potentially? Dawn says her daughter is a Taurus rising. Need to go look for that. Yeah. Hey, Beth is here. Just popped in. Said Beth EK. Says just popped in. I feel that Kate been feeling so ragey lately. Oh no, Taurus risings are getting Uranist. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the chart, and we'll start going through this sign by sign. So let me take. I'll let you take in that chart once more, and I'm going to take a little stretch break for a minute here. And I always like to take that opportunity to ask you a favor. Make sure that you like the video, that you are subscribed to the channel. If you missed the beginning of the show today, this is the last few days before you can sign up for the guided group study spring 2023. We're doing Sophie Strand's The Flowering Wand, which has a lot of nature themes. That's what I love about this book. This book is so Taurus. So Taurus. And if you're a Taurian type person, you will love this book. There's so many nature metaphors. There's so many ways that she's connecting ecology, ecosystems with myth, with divination, with spirituality. And I would love to take the next step with that book and take all of those themes that she is initiating us into and apply it to charts, apply it to astrology systems. I'm very much looking forward to expanding into what I am starting to call mycelial astrology. So if you are interested in nature and how we can see the chart through a natural, earthy lens, this class is for you. It starts Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay. Let me ring the bell one more time. If you are enjoying what you are experiencing today, there's a little $sign in the chat. It's called a super chat or a super sticker. That helps me to keep the lights on. You're helping to purchase new research materials, pay some bills, plant a tree, some flowers. It all goes into a good cause, I hope. And if you're listening to this after the fact, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. All right, let's get back to this eclipse. What do you say, friends? Jeannie says, that was so lovely, and I completely agree about us becoming trees and worm food. I had a hard time about past lives and the concept of us journeying as a single soul throughout multiple lifetimes. I hear you, Jeannie. I struggle with that sometimes too. Again, I don't have any memory of being alive in the past or a past life. That doesn't mean that I wasn't. I don't really have the market cornered on what happens after we die. I do know that these bodies will decay and will become worm food, and that is the truth. But as far as a soul, that's the great mystery, isn't it? That's what we're all trying to kind of ascertain and figure out through our spiritual practices and things of that nature. I do know that I have had some interesting communication with people after they've died. My mother in particular, that made me open my eyes a little bit about the potential for another plane of existence that I was very skeptical about in the past. So I would consider myself agnostic when it comes to that. I think that there's a possibility that there's more planes of existence and something that happens after death, and I think that it's also possible that we just return back to the earth and become something else. So we'll find out, won't we? And honestly, if we become worm food, we're probably not going to know the difference, right? We're probably just going to, be at peace. And I think that that's kind of beautiful too. So why would we fear that? That's only the ego that is afraid of not existing anymore, I guess. But we'll see. Okay. Well, Kate, sounds like you're going through some stuff, and I'm sorry that you're having some challenges, but hang in there. And Julie, no worries. Your presence here is a gift. Just do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Okay. New Moon Solar Eclipse in Aries 3. We've talked about Aries 3 a little bit. Again, if you want a deep dive into the third decan of Aries, look at my Jupiter Kazemi video from last week, especially the first hour of that as I went in depth into Aries 3. We've talked a little bit about the mutual reception between Venus and Mercury. They are exchanging signs. Mercury is also applying to Uranus, so we may have to utilize our resources in a very different way, although that aspect is not going to perfect before Mercury turns retrograde. So you may be thinking of doing things in a new way, but there's probably a review process that's going to be happening very shortly after this new moon solar eclipse. Okay. We have a Mars host that we should unpack now. So this is Mars as the host of this new moon. So one of the important concepts of any type of astrology, but especially Hellenistic astrology or traditional astrology, is that a planet has a guest host relationship, which means that it is drawing resources from the ruler of the sign that it is inhabiting. Now, if we were to take my mycelial networking metaphor from that I'm kind of working through with Sophie Strand's material, we could say that this eclipse is a fruiting body or a mushroom in Aries, right? In the Aries area of our chart. So let me draw a mushroom. Sorry if it looks phallic, but that's what mushrooms are. They literally little phalluses that pop up from the ground, right? There's a mushroom. I always think of Super Mario when I, when I draw mushrooms. I just draw mushrooms all day. So there is our fruiting body, the sun and the moon in Aries. Now, if we take our metaphor, our mycelial astrology metaphor, this fruiting body is connected by a mycelial network underground or whatever from Mars. So here's Mars in Cancer, providing all the nutrients and resources and topics for this eclipse. Okay. There's the moon and the sun in Aries. Okay. So you might see the visible part of this eclipse, maybe in the Aries area of your chart. But what is feeding it is from Mars, is from the Cancer area of your chart. Okay. So think about the topics that are associated with the numbered house where Mars is right now, because those are the underlying connections and networks that are helping to provide resources for this. Now, the challenge with this is that Mars is not in one of its favorite places. Let's say that Mars was in Aries with the Aries eclipse, it would be all systems go. It'd be like, let's do this. Let's go for it. You know, it's individual time. You know, like if Mars was in, I don't know, Scorpio, that would be a whole different experience where it would be more of a sustained energy potentially, but it would be a healthy expression of Mars potentially with it being in its own sign. Now, when we have Mars in its fall in Cancer, Mars is hanging out in the house of the moon. Now, isn't that interesting though? Because not only, I don't know, I missed this in my stupid notes, but we have a mutual reception between Mercury and Venus, but we also have a mutual reception between Mars and the moon. Okay, so that's interesting. That's interesting, isn't it? Because now Mars is in the moon's house and the moon is in Mars's house. So there is some secret connection between them, some way that they're helping one another. Okay, so there is, even though Mars is in a place that it is not comfortable in, remember Mars creates conflicts. It creates self-directed, willful expressions. It creates severing and separation. It creates heat. Okay. The moon is a planet that thrives in the coolness of the night, like cool, moist conditions. So Mars just heating everything up. Like I know Lynn was saying, in hot Vermont's usually a fairly cool place, I'm assuming. Michigan is usually cool this time of year. It's 85 degrees here right now. So Mars is heating things up in places that are cool, right? The other thing that the moon generally represents in the house of Cancer, the house of the moon, is our sense of security, our domestic situations. When Mars is in the second decan of Cancer, we're dealing with the energy that Austin Coppock calls a walled garden. Now I'm going to pull up the Cancer notes for you so you can see this, and we'll break that down. How's everybody doing? Doing good? Hanging out? Okay. So the second decan of Cancer is, you can see the Three of Cups with the three graces, toasting one another. And this card speaks to the ability to create harmonious group endeavors, I think. I have the sun in this decan, and so a lot of my life is focused on just exactly what we're doing here today, meeting up and sharing our abundance with one another, our abundance of knowledge, our abundance of time, whatever it is. But when Mars is in this place, we may feel separated from that. We may feel like a little bit like, it takes extra effort to create that experience potentially. We also expect a safe space, right, with the Cancer too. The walled garden is the protection that is necessary to bring something and nurture something to maturity. When Mars is here, it's hard to feel safe. It's hard to feel like we're getting the resources that we need to bring something to maturity. So that might be one of your experiences as well, is that maybe there is some kind of group endeavor or family endeavor or domestic situation where you really expect this harmonious interaction, but it's hard to come by right now because there's work to do. Now, how can we utilize this energy in a healthy way? Well, for me, I have Mars. Mars is fairly close to my sun right now. Like it's in, I bought a chainsaw. Like, I've never wielded a chainsaw before in my life. And I did the research to figure out how to do it safely. But I literally took an instrument of Mars, a cutting device, a saw, and I'm utilizing it in my domestic space to be able to clear out old crap. So getting rid of stuff that isn't serving us in our home, in our domestic environment, that's Mars and Cancer, man. Mars and Cancer too, particularly, sure. Got a neighbor in our house too that's having a big garage sale that's getting rid of a bunch of stuff, a bunch of clutter, and I'm here for it. So there are ways to utilize a planet in its fall or exile to be able to do that energy gracefully, right? Mars is really close to the fixed star Sirius as well, and we'll get to that in a second. But just some main themes with Mars here. Cancer 2 is about celebrations, rejoicing, mirth, maternal enclosure and safe spaces, being forged in the family fire. There's a spirit with this decan called Hercules, right? All know Hercules, but really Hercules or Heracles translates to the glory of Hera, and Hera was like his stepmom, I guess you could call it, and she really put Hercules through the mill. Like she tested him through her challenges and labors that she presented to him. So being forged in the family fire is a theme that I wrote down for this. Like a lot of people that have Cancer 2 in particular, but just Cancer in general, they didn't become nurturers because they had a nurturing family. Like they became nurturers because they understood what it was like not to have that. Not every Cancer. There's some Cancers that have wonderful families, but a lot of times we try to create that which we have lacked as a young person. So, sometimes we do get challenged by the mother in particular. I know that I did, and I've had to learn how to create harmonious situations, not only in my own family, but in my community as well. Quest for immortality, that is a part of Sirius, is the quest for immortality. It is also related to the story of, oh my goodness, the name is escaping me right now. Achilles. That is related to the myth of Achilles, where Achilles did not want to go to war, or his mother didn't want him to go to war. More particularly, his mother hid him away in a tent on a beach and tried to keep him alive because she knew that there was a prophecy that if he went to war, he would live on in immortality and in glory, but he would perish. He would live a short life that would be remembered forever. If he stayed home, he might live a long life, but he might be forgotten to the annuals of time. And that I can say from experience that is definitely a Cancerian 2 impulse. A lot of my thought process has gone into, will this last or not? And is it worth risking my safety for kleos or glory? Sometimes I think it is, and other times I've just hidden away in my shell. So this might be something that you're feeling. Is it worth sticking my head out there to do something important? Or is it safer to stay behind? And to be honest with you, I don't think that there's a wrong answer to that. I know that this culture encourages us to be more, do something amazing and wonderful and all of this. And yeah, it's okay to aspire, but I do think that there is beauty in simplicity as well. I think that scale is, well, let me reframe this. I don't think being spiritual has to do with scale. Does that make sense? I don't think that you being in alignment with your higher self and your higher purpose means that you have to do something grandiose. Sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is to take care of the people closest to you, is to take care of your day-to-day experience. Sometimes that is the most advanced spiritual thing you can do in that moment. And I think that it's a real disservice that we have so much noise in our cultures recently, in the last, I don't know, probably forever, but it feels more acute with like the internet, where we feel like we have to do more, say more, be more to win people's love and approval, and to win our own love and approval. And I just think that that's a fallacy and an illusion. So think about what is appropriate to take a risk for, and what is, sometimes it's a risk to commit to something domestic. It's not always easy either. So some questions you can ask yourself about Mars here. What in your life is worth protecting? How can you create a safe space to promote healthy growth? How can you best appreciate the moment or share your abundance? What familial challenges have shaped your character? Are you owning your divinity or projecting it onto others? That's interesting and important. I think that Thetis, or Themis, I can't remember if it was Thetis or Themis, which was the mother of Achilles, projected her own divinity onto the mortal Achilles, right? Even so far as to dip him into the pools of the river Styx to grant him part of that immortality. Another Cancerian cliche is to not own our own divinity and to project it onto a child, or project it onto a creative project, or project it onto a partner. I've been guilty of this. I told this story on this channel in the past, but my daughter got into competitive swimming, and for me, it was the projection of her swimming was like, oh my God, we're going to the Olympics. If I only nurture this person enough, with enough discipline and support, she'll be an Olympian. And she became a fine swimmer. But at the end, there came a point where we both had to ask each other, because she's a Capricorn, so she went along with it for a period of time. And then I think there came a point where we both had to look at each other and say, is this what my daughter really wants? Is this really what is true for her, and not just a projection of immortality that I might be putting pressure on her to do? And at the end of the day, we had to make some tough decisions around that and come to a place of reality. And we were both healthier for it. Just because you've gone down these pathways in the past doesn't mean that you can't make changes, right? We all fall short of the glory sometimes, and a lot of these are learning experiences. So how can you own your own divinity and your own creativity, your own creative impulses, rather than projecting them onto others? And then what connects you with the timelessness? This is another thing. I think that oftentimes Cancerians are accused of being nostalgic or living in the past. I think that it's a little bit different than that. Just from my own experience and my own taste, I gravitate towards works of art, like in music and things of that nature, clothing styles that I feel are timeless. I'm not an early adapter. I'm somebody who says, if this song is still popular 50 years after the fact, there must be something good about it, because the things that didn't last maybe weren't as well crafted. And same thing with like a piece of clothing. Maybe you gravitate towards retro fashion or vintage fashion because some of those things are just made better. There's a reason why that piece of clothing or those shoes or whatever are still around 50 years later. It's because someone made it really well. Because if it wasn't made well, it would just disintegrate instantaneously. So this is part of the timelessness part about it. And how do you find that experience in your own life? So I'm going to look at the chat here. I see there's been some nice comments coming in. Oh. All right. Kate and Julie are supporting one another. I love it. Tracy says, I read about the book in your newsletter. It sounds incredible. Totally with you on Mycelium and Astro. Love to join, but I don't have the resources right now at the moment, so I won't be able to join. That's okay, Tracy. I know that it's things are tough right now. And again, releasing a class during like tax season isn't probably the smartest move on my part. Anyway, this is probably part of the Mars and Cancer 2 experience that I'm having, is trying to get people on board with a group endeavor is a little bit more difficult during this time. But again, Tracy, I will say, if you need help with like a payment plan or something like that, that is available, if that would make it easier. And also there will be a future offerings too. So if you miss out on this one, it's not the end of the world, but I would love to make it possible for those of you who may need some accommodations. Leanne Rogers says, Mars is at 13 degrees Cancer in my natal chart. Oh my goodness, Leanne. So you're going to have a Mars return during this eclipse. So that should be interesting. Keep me posted on what happens. That's keep an eye out for maybe some family challenges around that, and try not to get too upset about that. It's temporary. This isn't something where we have a big Mars retrograde where Mars is going to be hanging out in Cancer forever. We've had those in the past, and that was very difficult. This is a temporary influence that should pass within a few weeks. Silent Murmur is here. It says it does seem like increasing privacy and sense of safety within a walled garden. Yeah. To block out motor noise, if not for reasons that make us feel at home. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, for a Cancerian, a home is their sanctuary. Because of the sensitivity and the vulnerability of Cancer as a prey animal, which I think is funny. Just to give you a little preview, the animal I pulled today was the crab. I was like, oh, interesting. That's why I was like, I better spend some time with Mars in Cancer, because that's going to be pretty important. And I'll talk more about the crab in a minute. But crabs, they're prey animals. They're very sensitive, and they're aware of their environments because they have to be, because they're food for other animals. Because sometimes it's hard for us to defend ourselves. We've got these pinchers, and these hard shells, but underneath we're soft and squishy. So the ability to move in many directions, the ability to protect oneself, the ability to hide is actually very important to stay alive. I've had to learn at various times in my life how to hide for my own safety. And oftentimes we can get too attached to hiding for safety. That might be another part of this, is how do we balance out our ability to retreat into safety to our ability to take a risk again. You get burned enough times and it makes it harder to take a risk, but that's where the childlike innocence comes in and the faith comes in. Just because we've been burned in one certain situation does not mean that every situation like that is going to burn us again, or every single person that looks like that person or in the same field as that person is going to be a danger. Doesn't mean that you should let yourself be abused. I mean, there's healthy self-preservation is important. But, just like, for example, like if you're in a relationship that goes south, doesn't mean you can never have a partner again. Somebody might be a completely different, energy, a different character than your previous relationship. And the key really is that the changes within you are the most important to be able to attract the type of person that will support you and that will be kind to you. And I say that not because of some law of attraction type of thing, but because when you have the type of self-esteem that says, I'm not going to allow myself to be abused, the people that will try to take your energy and be abusive, you're just not going to allow them into your sphere. Maybe they'll catch one whiff of your self-confidence and be like, no, I'm going to move on to an easier target. So it's more about how can you People are a reflection of how we think about ourselves as mirrors on some level. Okay, I'm looking through the chat. Tracy says, "Too right, fellow Cancerian here." Mushroom emoji. Yeah, us Cancers, man, we're complicated folks. Not as big a pushovers as people like to paint us as. And we're not babies all the time. We can be babies. We can pout, but we can be pretty darn tenacious as well. You know, like mostly if there's someone that we care about that is threatened, we are not people to trifle with in that circumstance. That's where the fighting instincts do come out, is if something or someone that we value is either being taken away from us or being hurt, then we are scary people. But I think that Cancerians prefer peace and kindness. I think that's our baseline. The negative stereotypes with Cancer, I think, really do come from a Cancer that has been really abused, that is overly protective of others or of the self, and ones that maybe either overprotective. Did I say that? Yeah, we can be very overprotective and overdo things. But again, balance is the key. Silent Murmur says, setting limitations to the constant pageantry of distracting intrusions. Oh my goodness, I know about that. Kate says, like being a perfect mother, doing it all when in reality, this isn't sustainable. Yeah, fucking A, Kate. I hear you. We do need to learn to rest sometimes, don't we? We can't do everything for everyone all the time. We do have to take our own needs into account, or we're not going to be able to nurture others. Kate says, accepting flaws, choosing how you balance based on values despite social expectations. Yes. I'm looking through. Okay. Tarja T is here from Finland. Nice to see you, Helsinki friend. These are such great comments. I'm just trying to, we're going to have to kind of go through a little bit quicker here. Keep putting them in the section here, though. I love all these comments. You all have very amazing observations. Silent Murmur saying, it's good to remember we can avoid people with certain issues that can waste a lot of our time. Yeah. Yep. All right. So friends, I think we've broken down Mars. We have a mutual reception with Mars and the Moon. We have a mutual reception with Mercury and Venus. These planets are trying to help each other. They are, Mars isn't in a great space, but it's having help. It has help from the Moon. Let's talk a little bit about this eclipse through the houses. So I'm going to go back to my chart. We'll go through this a little bit quicker than we did the last time. I'm going to get myself a little snack here because I think my blood sugar is getting low. Okay, so as I did before, I'm going to start with Aries again. I know that you Piscean risings are always like, they always start with Aries. Well, So what I'm doing is I'm moving the chart to Aries rising, just so you can get an idea. Where is this? Okay, I'm just trying to figure out the way to make it closest to the time. Well, that doesn't really work, does it? Let's go this way. Now again, this is going to be hours away from the eclipse itself, okay? But I'm just going to put these planets in the chart so that you can see where the basic planets are going to be, okay? So this is Aries rising. So this is in your first house, Aries rising. And this is a whole new start regarding your sense of self, your sense of individuality, your sense of who you are as a person and how you put yourself out into the world. You just had a Jupiter Cazimi in your first house, which is very beneficial, fortuitous, hopefully. Maybe it didn't, maybe your world didn't change with the Jupiter Cazimi, but give it some time, and especially pay attention to the Sagittarius and the Pisces areas of your chart for a new start, which in this case would be the 9th house and the 12th. But I want to focus with taking this through the houses with where Mars is in particular. So Mars may be creating conflict in your 4th house, and it is providing you the impetus to be more of an individual through separation from some of the support that you might have expected in your, maybe in your family, maybe being separated from a parent or something of that nature. Maybe there is something where you've been freed to pursue your own direction due to the ending in your 4th house, the house of the parents, the house of the family, the house of your domestic circumstance. Okay, so there's a new freedom that comes with that. There's a mutual reception between the moon and Mars through the 1st and the 4th house. So, being able to get rid of the junk in your house, or to separate from expectations of support. This is important with Mars and Cancer. Sometimes the silent agreement that many Cancerians make is, I'll take care of you if you take care of me, so. Whereas the Pisces expectation is not that. Pisces is like, I will sacrifice me for you. That's cliched. Okay, that's a cliche. But I do think that there is I do think there's an expectation of reciprocity in a lot of Cancerian placements. And you might be cut off from some of that. So releasing that expectation can allow you to go your own way. And I think that can be very beneficial. Now, there's also a mutual reception between Mercury and Venus in the 2nd and the 3rd house. So being able to start a new point of study, to change up your routines, to explore a little bit in your 3rd house with neighbors, siblings, with new forms of study, could potentially bring you new resources. Although Mercury is about to retrograde in your 2nd house. So be very careful about over-investing yourself in something, particularly maybe something like a learning experience or something, because you might have to reevaluate how you're spending your money. So that is Aries rising. I'll look through the chat here if there's any questions. Tar Yuti, Cancer rising here. Home is my sanctuary. Yes, I've lived in the same house for 45 years. I just love my home. Yeah, I hear you. When the opportunity came to transition from being a renter to a homeowner, my partner and I basically had to move heaven and earth to stay put in our house. And it's not a perfect situation. There's a lot of compromises we're making from our dream to where we're at, but we do love the house, and it is hard to move when you have been attached to something. Jeannie says, could the Pluto or Saturn aspects by house placement have any effects on this eclipse? Well, yes, and maybe even the lack of aspects from Saturn. So Saturn's going to be an aversion to the eclipse. So Saturn, I wouldn't say that Saturn is actually a huge part of the eclipse story itself. Although what I will say is that Saturn in particular is in the overcoming square to Venus, and in an overcoming trine to Saturn. So there is some pressure from Saturn and Pisces on the Mars and Cancer area to be able to say, why are we doing this? Is your dream realistic? Okay, can you let go of a dream that isn't serving you anymore? And can you make the dream that is most important to your heart real? But also Saturn in Pisces is in that overcoming square to Venus, is kind of saying, you're not going to be able to explore every avenue. You're not going to be able to make, you're going to have to make a choice. You may want to expand your options, but Saturn in Pisces says that's really not realistic. I'm feeling this with my garden. It's like there's so many possibilities and designs and different plants that you could put in, or different trees. Like I'm looking at different trees, and at a certain point, you're going to miss your opportunity if you don't just pick one and put it in the ground. You see what I'm saying? Like that's kind of what Saturn's saying to Venus right now. It's like, don't overdo it with your with your options that you're trying to explore. Jennifer is here. Hello, Jennifer. Jennifer, oh yeah, my experience with my daughter with softball as well. Yeah, I would imagine, Jennifer, you're referring to the projection of divinity onto our children, and wanting to sacrifice for maybe our own dream rather than theirs. Like, we have to catch ourselves in that. I mean, if your child or your partner or whoever you're pouring this energy into, because honestly, Cancers are masters. They can be masterful at supporting somebody into growing into their potential. This is one of the things that I appreciate about being a teacher, is helping other people grow in their potential. So there's gifts that Cancerian folks have in this. But you have to make sure it's what they want as well. If it's what we want, that's when the things get blurry and the waters get mingled in a way that can be unhealthy. So I've had to learn how to like ask people what they want and say, what do you want me to help you grow into fruition? And you know what else you get? You get a lot more buy-in when you have that communication with people. And it's so much easier to help people because they are putting energy into it rather than you trying to drag them along to something, which is always painful for both parties. Aries, Kate says, Aries rising, could this increase things in blood? Like just physically in your blood? Like your bloodstream? Do you have any clarification with that, Kate? Since it's in the first house, Mars and Cancer too. Maybe. I wouldn't say that I'm a medical astrology expert. I would say that the first house, I'm not even going to attempt to do that. I think it would be malpractice if I was just like, let me give you some medical advice based on this chart. So I'm not even going to try to do that. I was thinking about pulling something out of my ass, but I think it's better just to admit that when something isn't in your wheelhouse. I do know that Aries is associated with the head. Mars is, what is Mars associated with? Yeah, Mars is the blood sometimes. The Cancer is associated with the breast region, sometimes the lymphatic system, because it's related to the moon. So, but there's some really great medical astrologers out there. I think what's her name? I can't remember this lady's name, but I have a number of books by her, especially Judith Hill is a great medical astrologer. I think Lee Lehman also does some medical stuff. My friend Michael Bryant does some medical astrology too, I think. So those are good resources to check out with that. Dawn says, you cannot live another's life for them, period. It doesn't serve either party well. Exactly, Dawn. I agree. It's a tough lesson. It's a tough lesson to learn, because we want to be helpful. We want to be helpful. We want to help. We need something to pour our love into. We need a container to pour all this watery emotional energy into. But sometimes, again, it's not the easiest thing. Okay, so that's Aries rising. I'm going to move forward. So I'm going to look at Taurus rising. So here's Taurus rising, and now the eclipse moves to the 12th house. So this is and remember, this energy, if you don't just feel your whole entire world change next Thursday, just remember that these things take time to unfold. This is like the title of a chapter that you're about to read. It's not the entire chapter. So if we think about it in those terms, maybe the title is Get Some Rest. If you're Taurus rising, you've probably been burning the candle at both ends with Uranus blowing your first house to hell, really challenging you to get outside of your comfort zone and break up your ruts and your routines. So this might be a really great time to build in some solitude, some individual space. Mars is going to be providing resources from the third house of your daily habits, your daily routines. I know a lot of people say that that's the sixth house, but in Hellenistic astrology, the joy of the moon is the third house. And there's a lot of just like the daily journeys and habits that you do with the third house. So shifting those things up, you might be having some challenges with neighbors, with siblings. You may not be receiving the type of support in your extended family that you would hope for. And that can be part of this story that we're unfolding. You know, there's a mutual reception between Mercury and Venus over your first and second house. So by reviewing some of the way that you utilize your personal resources, how you treat your body, that could potentially lead to new skills that could provide things for you financially. Although there is an overcoming square from Saturn to Venus, so potentially some either I don't know, a lot of times I see with 11th house, people are being denied government benefits or something, or having to fill out a lot of paperwork around it, since it's the second from the 10th, which relates to the government. So there could be some like things about the group that are putting some financial pressure on you, where you might have to go off in search of a way to support yourself. So think about that as we move forward too. Jupiter can be like a saving grace or the help that you didn't want but need, says Kate. Yes. Silent Murmur says we need things to pour ourselves into with good circulation. Yes, yes. Yeah, water can get stagnant if you pour it into a cup that there's not good exchanges with. I'm feeling that lately. The water in my own personal cup has started to stagnate a little bit, and I'm thinking about how I can circulate a little bit more. It's not an easy question to answer, especially if you're, grappling with issues of safety and security and trust. Okay, so Taurus rising, just take a time out, recognize that you might be utilizing your resources in a different way. There's some reviews that are going to happen around your first house that could be related to the fifth house and also the second house. So how you spend your money on pleasure could also be up for review around this eclipse as well. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going a little quicker through this because I'm gonna have to go eat dinner pretty soon. That's the main reason. So here's Gemini rising. So Gemini rising, you've got the eclipse happening in the 11th house, the house of groups, friendships, people that you have a shared sense of purpose with. Again, it could also be related to benefits that you receive from a government institution or things of that nature, as the second house from the 10th. Venus is in your first house. So there may be a desire to explore. You may be attracted to exploring a lot of different directions right now, but the square from Saturn in the 10th means that there's some responsibilities that you have, maybe in your job or publicly, that are making that feel a little bit difficult. Mars in your second house is probably separating you from some sources of income, potentially from a family member that could have been supporting you, or that you may have a lot of money that you have to spend due to a domestic responsibility potentially, and that could put pressure on you. Mercury is going to be retrograding in your 12th and in mutual reception with Venus in your first. So you may have to reevaluate how you take a time out. If you're giving too much energy to others, you're going to have to reclaim some of that with Mercury retrograde in the 12th. This could just be a time where your brain is just active, and it's important to slow down when you're a Gemini rising and say, do I really need to explore this thought today or tonight at 3 a.m.? Like I think that's the main thing, is oftentimes there's an anxiety because we feel like we have to follow every mental pathway, no matter when it comes up. So I would say one of the main advice I would give you for this Mercury in the 12th sometimes and just Gemini in general, can you compartmentalize those thoughts? Can you write it down and say, I will revisit this at a more appropriate time? I think a great self-care thing for a Gemini rising, sun, anything, just keep a journal by your bed. And if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're chewing on something in your brain, write it down. Say, I will get to this in the morning. And what that does is that tells your inner monkey mind or your inner muse that I'm not ignoring this, but I will come back to it when I have the energy and when it's an appropriate time to deal with it. And that can be really liberating. I've tried to do that with my morning pages as a Venus and Gemini. I just get everything out of my brain. I just dump it on the page, and then I can deal with it when it's appropriate, not when it just is bubbling up all the time. I like to make lists too, which really helps me to prioritize. Okay, so that is Gemini rising. Let's take a look at Cancer rising. Oh my goodness, Cancer rising, you sensitive souls. Oh, Cancer risings, you have Mars in the first. You have a new Moon Solar Eclipse in the 10th house of your career, your public life. To me, I've seen a lot of Cancer rising friends initiating new jobs, new projects. They're putting themselves out there. They're like saying, I've had this thing cooking and gestating for quite some time, and now I'm putting myself out there. It's not the most comfortable space for a Cancer anything to be in the spotlight. Just think about any type of creature that would be comfortable in the night, in this moist, cool environment where it can hide and where it can kind of do things at its own pace and feel comfortable. And then think about turning a 100,000 watt solar spotlight on it, right? And it feels just dried out and just like, oh my God, I'm gonna burn up, right? And that's probably part of the pressure that is happening with Mars in the first house of like, oh my God, I've got so many things I'm trying to do publicly that it's really taking away from that feeling of peaceful sanctuary in my own well-being. The advice I can give you with that is that there's just some times where you gotta be brave and put yourself out there. If you put yourself out there with this 10th house, it's, who knows what could come of it. There could be something that could really provide you with more security. What I've, felt in my life is a lot of times with both Cancer and Taurus, there's an inertia quality that comes into play where, sometimes we won't move unless we have to, unless we're uncomfortable. And sometimes we have to manufacture situations that make us uncomfortable so we can continue to grow. This is another thing about the crab that's really interesting. Like hermit crabs, for example, they grow so much that sometimes they have to discard their shell and they feel a little bit vulnerable in the transition period when they're looking for a new home that fits them, where they can continue to expand and grow and thrive. So this is probably one of those periods of time for you, Cancer rising, where you're feeling a little bit like vulnerable because you are exposed, but it's in the name of healthy growth, I think. And just be careful not to let the pressure make you cranky. Pace yourself, right? Just pace yourself. There's a mutual reception between Venus in your 12th and Mercury in the 11th. You again may have to reevaluate your participation in some groups so that you can get some much needed rest. Saturn is also putting pressure on Venus from the 9th house. So you may be really questioning, why am I doing this? This is actually a Cancerian thing too. Oftentimes the difference between Cancer and Capricorn placements is really the difference between a lunar and a Saturnian consciousness. Saturn type people are like, I just have to do this. I may not enjoy it, but I'm bound to it. There's a binding, there's a contract I have with myself to do this, whether I want to or not, which is roughly translates to discipline. Where the moon is like, if I don't feel like it, I'm not going to do it. If I'm not connected with it emotionally, I'm not going to do it. So Saturn in the 9th house is doing a couple things. It's saying, it's binding you to ask, why are you doing what you're doing? And if you're not resonating with it emotionally, you might have to change your perspective on things so that you can get out there and thrive and flourish. Okay, so that might be the pressure that Saturn's putting, not only on Mars, but on Venus with the overcoming square. So everybody in this eclipse should be really asking themselves, why are we doing what we're doing? And is it serving a greater good, or is it self-serving? Because remember, it's an eclipse. I talked about at the beginning of the show that yes, this is an energy of trying to get people on board, but people are going to be on board with your vision if they can see how they benefit from it, not just how you benefit from it. Does that make sense? That's really important. Like, to get buy-in from people, the project that you are doing needs to be in alignment with greater good. So think about that as you move forward. Michelle says, my only child, my only son, is a beautiful Cancer rising, Cap Sun. He's thinking about finishing his BA. Right, so he's got Saturn in the 9th house, with Saturn bringing endings and bringing responsibilities and heaviness, saying, you know what, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this finished. So some dreams are going to get finished around this period of time, like getting your degree. 9th house is also related to higher education. So, working really hard to finish a degree could be a manifestation of that. Silent Murmur says, finding ways of making goals more possible from the stable base. I agree. What makes it worthwhile, and why do we think or believe that? Yeah, the why is really important, especially for Cancerian folks. I'm guilty of this 100%. My Capricorn rising partner, I watch her grind out things that she's miserable doing because it's the right thing to do, where I'm just like, I just can't do that. There's just almost nothing that can make me do something if I don't feel like it's in alignment with meaning. If I don't see meaning in it, it's just really, really hard for me to do it. And I'm not saying that either one of those approaches is right or wrong. I think that that's why she and I get along well. I'm Cancer Sun, she's a Cap rising, 7th house. We are helping to provide a balance point for one another. Like for me, I always ask her, why are you doing this? What does it mean to you? What is it bringing you? And then for her, she's like, just do it. Like, why do you have to like think about it, till the all ends of of time? Just get it over with, get it off your plate, suck it up, and both of those things are valid as far as like being able to provide harmony. Okay. So that is Cancer rising. Let's look at Leo rising. So Leo risings have this happening in their 9th house. The eclipse is happening in your 9th house of higher education, belief system, going on a journey to find aforementioned meaning. There may be some challenges with getting peace, solitude. Your anger may be repressed. There may be a secret enemy that is undermining you behind the scenes type of thing, or you may be undermining yourself through your own self-doubt. A lot of times Leo risings, they may appear confident to the world, but a Leo anything is hyper self-aware. Like, imagine that you pass, they get accused, my daughter and I, both Leo risings, and we've never seen a reflective surface that we haven't stopped to admire ourselves in. And it's not just because we're like, oh my God, look how awesome I look. It's like, oh my God, do I look okay? Right? It's a hyper self-awareness of like, holy shit, I need to make sure that I'm, well put together at this moment. And part of that just comes from a little bit of an insecurity where Leo anything wants to be loved and wants to be appreciated and feels that if they are not at their best, that they would rather not be seen. That's if you have a Leo rising friend, they will disappear every once in a while because there might not be, if they do disappear, maybe check in with them, because they're probably not feeling very good. They're probably going through something. So this is going to help you to ask, what is your meaning? What is your purpose? How can you not be your own worst enemy with this Mars and Cancer? You know, how can you get over the self-conflict that can lead you to self-sabotage? There is going to be a Mercury retrograde in your 10th house, so a reevaluation of your methods around your career. There's a mutual reception though with Venus, so maybe doing some things different in your career can lead to some harmonious interactions with the group. I know that I'm gonna have a Mercury retrograde on my natal moon at 15 at 15 Taurus. I also want you to keep in mind that Mercury, for all signs, is going to be retrograding at the same degree that Jupiter is going to be retrograding later on in the year, 15 degrees of Taurus. So I know for me personally, I have a lot of things that are cooking in my brain, reevaluating just how I'm doing some things. My life circumstances have changed a little bit since my daughter went to school and went to college, and I'm having to make some different financial decisions. I'm having to make some different decisions about how I utilize my time and how I find meaning. And that may make the form of what I'm doing here change slightly. I don't think the essence is going to change. The essence of what I do here is, you might think about this as a Leo rising. What is the essence of what you do, and how can the form change publicly to serve the life that you are living now? The essence of what I'm trying to do here is to create harmony out in the world, to be an example, I hope, of kindness, the power of kindness, to help you to use astrology to understand your life and to find peace. So whatever form that takes, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I would like to expand what I'm doing or figure out ways to keep it fresh for myself as well, and to keep growing myself. Is the other thing that I'm thinking about as Leo rising, is how do I keep learning and growing, and also how do I turn that learning into a source of abundance and support for my own life and for my own career? How do I make money doing this too? So that's when you're a self-employed person, you have to constantly think about and reevaluate what is working and what isn't. But at the end of the day, here's where the eclipse might come in. It's not just about what could benefit you, Leo rising. It's about, is what you're doing benefiting your community as well? And when you benefit your community, the money will come. If you provide value for people, people will provide value back. I mean, I know that that's a tough assumption to make sometimes, because it isn't always 100% equal, and it isn't always true, but for the most part it is. So thinking about how you provide value to the world and what that's worth to you is something to think about as a Leo rising as well. Okay. And some pressure, you could feel with Saturn. Saturn in the 8th house, like dealing with, I don't know, the resources of others, could be putting pressure on your 11th house. Like, it's tax season, so maybe there's a tax issue that you're dealing with. Like, I had to do my taxes last week, and it turned out okay, but there was some moments of reevaluation with taxes. Once your kid moves out and goes to college, your whole tax liability completely changes, and that changes a lot of the way that you save money over the course of a year, and the deductions you take and things like that. And so if you're going through a change, that could be part of the issue with that too. Looking through the chat, let's see. So Silent Murmur and Kate are supporting one another. Kate is a Leo rising. How I am perceived by others really affects me. Yeah, Kate. I mean, like they said, there's a hyper awareness of how we appear to the world. I don't think it's necessarily only, I wouldn't call it narcissism, although when we take it to the extreme, that could be a manifestation of it. Leo is more about how can you be your most authentic self while also encouraging others to be their authentic self? I think that there's a real cheerleader energy with Leo where it says, I'm going to be me. And isn't this great? This is the real me. And aren't you great too? Like I really do think that there is that energy in Leo, Leo rising, Leo sun, when we're healthy, when we're feeling good about ourselves. It's so easy to appreciate the beauty and individuality and authenticity in others. The only time that Leos and Leo risings get ugly is when we're not feeling good about ourselves, and then the things that they warn us about with Regulus, right? The jealousy, the vengeance, the like power tripping. You know, the key with Leo is that you don't have to dominate others to be great. Like, you know, the sun shines light on everyone and everything, and it's not always a competition, right? Everyone can be the most authentic self. But it's hard though. The urge to dominate is, I think, a Leo urge. It's a solar urge. Look at how the light blocks things out. When I was an athlete, I was younger as an athlete and as a musician, I wanted to dominate. I wanted to just completely obliterate my competition. Like I remember, like I was very intense as an athlete. I had a lot of energy, really just burned myself out. I have a lot of injuries now because I just didn't know the limitations of my body. My spirit, my will was fierce, but my body was middling. Like I had middling athleticism. You know, I was a good athlete, but I wasn't like a transcendent athlete. But I did have a transcendent will, which got my average body in trouble. But as a musician, I would go up on stage, and I would be like, I want to completely annihilate anyone that would come before or after me on this stage. Like I'd go to open mics and I'd be like, I'm going to just completely wow this crowd. And that person that came before me, I'm going to make them look silly. And that was like the younger, more uninvolved version of myself. I don't necessarily feel that now, although I do enjoy like the awe factor, but I've learned that you can share that light with others. You don't have to like blot everyone out. You know what I mean? So I hope that's helpful for you, Leo risings. Let's move on to Virgo rising. So Virgo rising, the eclipse is going to be happening in your 8th house of shared resources. Okay. You are probably seeing a new start, a new initiatory start with the money that you share with others. There could be like a tax issue that comes up, an inheritance issue, the beginning of something regarding that. Mars is feeding that eclipse from the 11th house of groups, of government resources as well. This again could be something where you're cut off from government benefits and you're going to have to rely on your own initiative on some level, or make a new start in how you see how you are supported by others. I've talked to a few Virgo risings, some even in this chat last week, that were talking about having some difficulty getting some support from like disability or from like medical insurance or something like that. That's a possibility with this. You may have to fight for it. Like, I would encourage any of you who are in need of support like that to not just roll over and die, you know, like to fight for it. This system in America in particular, and I apologize to the international folks that don't have to deal with the super corrupt American medical system, but they're going to make it as hard as possible for you to get those benefits. And you're going to have to fight for it, is what I'll say, Virgo rising, if that's part of your story. You know, fill out all the paperwork. Don't let, you know, people take that away from you if that's something that you need for your survival. Okay, you have to fight a little harder for it. You also might be having some difficulty within a group. Like maybe there is something where you're, you know, just feeling a little bit less visible lately. You don't want to be as visible with the eclipse in the 8th house. And that could make it difficult to relate to the groups that you are a part of or that you share a vision with. Mercury, which rules your ascendant, is going to be retrograding soon in your 9th house, but is in mutual reception with Venus in your 10th. So reevaluating your why, asking questions about how you show up for others, how you give and receive, and the meaning that it brings you to be able to give of your time and resources to others, and are you reciprocating in a healthy fashion? A lot of times Virgos give beyond what is comfortable to them, and that might be something to reevaluate around this as well. Venus also is trying to smooth out things in your 10th house, but there might be some pressure from your partnerships and working together with other people. You might want to explore in your career, but there might be another party, romantic or otherwise, or professional, that's asking you to reevaluate some of those things. It might be putting a pressure, or there might be an important ending that's coming with a 7th house Saturn as well, and either in a relationship or in a project that you're working on. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to Libra rising. There's another Libra rising stepping in. The Riva Chist 2790. Well, you're just in time for the Libra rising part of the hour. So Libra rising, here we get to one of the angular houses again, okay? And I said at the beginning of the broadcast that the angular eclipses will be felt more personally in your life. So Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. We've analyzed the Aries rising and the Cancer rising. Both of them are having a very intense eclipse season, with them happening in either house 1, 10, 7, or 4. So in this case, Libra rising has the eclipse in the 7th house. So a powerful new beginning in your 7th house of relationships, but you are also probably feeling a lot of pressure from your job with Mars in the 10th house, maybe even some conflict with authority figures, or with a boss, or with a vision. Oftentimes Libra risings, if you have the midheaven in Cancer, are looked to for support in the workplace. They are the nurturers in the workplace, the people that people come to, air their grievances. And you may be feeling, Libra rising, that you're just tired of people's bullshit, and people aren't finding the shoulder to cry on that you would normally provide. And you know what? That's okay. Sometimes people have to fend for themselves, and you're going to find that you may be more inclined to let people do that around this period of time, especially in the workplace. There is a mutual reception that's happening between Venus and Mercury in your 9th and your 8th house. So by reevaluating how much you give to others with Mercury turning retrograde, you may be able to find more joy and meaning in your philosophical outlook on life. Maybe this is a good time to reevaluate, the trip that you're planning or something like that, so you don't overspend or something like that also. Saturn's putting some pressure on Venus from your 6th house, so there could be some health issues that are coming up where you're having to really either change your diet or change your health routines. Maybe there was some illness that came up that is making it difficult for you to go on vacation or to go on that trip or something like that. And there also potentially could be something where you're like, I need to change this habit so that I can be healthier and move on. And Mars is going to be in an overcoming square to your 1st house too. That also can be an indication of maybe a health challenge also, because pressure at work could be making it very difficult on your body. So just be careful and take it easy, and make sure you have the time to recharge your batteries when you need it. Okay. Let's move on to Scorpio rising. Scorpio rising. Now, first of all, Scorpio rising, you have the eclipse in your 6th house of the aforementioned injury, illness, health changes, doing a lot of work behind the scenes that you might not be getting credit for, which I will tell you is important to do sometimes, even if you aren't getting the parade. It is not necessarily about the end result, but the journey. This is something for anybody with 6th house placements to consider, is that even if you've been pulled away from some kind of completion, like the 6th house is being pulled away from the 7th house of celebration, completion, endings, through no fault of your own. It's a house of the joy of Mars, which is of the lunar sect. So there's maybe some misfortune that is coming from 6th house placements that's not really your fault. It may cause you to have to work pretty hard, but the journey is an important realization with that. Like how can you appreciate the process? 6th house to me is a very process orientated house. So there may be something new where you're initiating some kind of new health routine, process, behind the scenes work. Mars is providing resources or conflict or challenges from the 9th house. This could also be a legal challenge. Now, Mars is the ruler of your ascendant too. So when Mars is in Cancer, you're probably not feeling great as a Scorpio rising. You're probably feeling emotional. It's probably not a great time to cross the Scorpio risings in your life right now, because they are not going to be as well, they're not going to be direct about how they're going to choose to destroy you. So there may be a little bit of a behind the scenes survival mechanism that gets initiated. If a Scorpio rising is feeling unsafe in their physical and domestic environment, they're dangerous people to be around. Any Scorpio person who's feeling threatened is a dangerous enemy that you don't want to make. It's also an important time for Scorpio risings to consider how they can release their philosophical dependence on some forms of security. Now, Saturn is making an overcoming square to Venus from the 5th to the 8th. You know, it's a good time for Scorpio risings to release or to become more disciplined about how they seek pleasure in their life. Oftentimes, Scorpio risings have to really deal with things like addiction and leaving behind attachments that they are very passionate about, because part of Scorpio's energy is compost, releasing old form, not pursuing something to the point of it becoming an obsession or a debauch, right? That last decan of Scorpio in particular is about trying to keep some form alive that has already passed on, that the moment has passed. And it's important for you to learn to let go. So in this case, you know, potentially there could be a reckoning with the way that you seek pleasure that could make it very difficult to have a good time with others, right? With Venus in the 8th house, or the resources that you share. Now, there is a mutual reception with Mercury and Venus in the 7th and 8th house. There's probably some relationship questions that are coming up during this eclipse season. Probably reevaluating how you spend money with a partner, how you support someone else, your daily habits and routines. Like, all of those things are up for negotiation within a partnership and a relationship. And that can actually lead to some positive things with Venus in your 8th house. It's important to have integrity. All of the Venus placements that I've talked about for the rising signs, remember that Venus is on Aldebaran. It's important in that particular area for you to maintain your integrity. There's no shortcuts with that. So with Scorpio rising, no shortcuts with sharing money with other people. Like, don't cheat on your taxes this year. Like, that's 8th house is a tax issue sometimes too. Okay. Yeah, Don says, feel the sting. Yeah, you don't want to feel the sting. Now, don't get me wrong, Scorpio risings can be the most loyal, protective people in the world, and Scorpio placements. I have some of my best friends as a Cancer sun are Scorpio suns and placements, but don't cross them. That cliche is a cliche for a reason. Okay. Here's Sagittarius rising. So Sagittarius rising, the eclipse is going to be in your 5th house. Okay. Mars is going to be providing resources for this eclipse from the 8th. The 5th house is related to children, pleasure seeking, passing on a legacy, because it is the succeedent house to the 4th. We can consider children a legacy on some level. Creative projects, personal creativity. This could be a new start in all of those areas. You may have to sever and separate from some expected support from a partner. Maybe there's something going on with an inheritance or a legacy where there's conflict over it. So try not to get too distracted by that potentially. Saturn is going to be in that overcoming square to Venus from your 4th. Let's see. Right. Yeah, Dawn is commenting on Scorpio rising about, much like a Cancer, when they are wounded, they tend to wound back. Yeah, I agree with that. Cancers, we're not really people that start fights. At least I'm not. But if you bring one to us, we'll be your huckleberry, we'll get very defensive. And a cornered, scared animal is a dangerous one. So think about that with both your Cancer and your Scorpio people, because it's a similar energy. Although with Cancer, I don't know if there's the crush and destroy instinct that the Scorpion has with Cancer. More so, like a Cancer is more like, I don't need to destroy you, but you're not going to hurt me anymore. You're not going to find me. I'm going to go hide, and then you're dead to me. That's the Cancer response, is like, I'm never going to forget that pain that you did to me. And it's going to be a long ass time before you're going to get me to come out of my shell to allow you to do anything like that again. That to me is the Cancer version of that. Whereas sometimes the Scorpio energy is like, I have to go on the offensive to completely annihilate this other threat. Cancer doesn't annihilate a threat. They just kind of snap at it, until it goes away, which can be really annoying. We can be really annoying. Back to Sagittarius rising. Sorry to get hijacked with more Cancerian nonsense. I'm gonna get some mulberries here. So Sag rising, you got Saturn moving through your 4th house. Probably some endings happening within your home, your domestic situation, possibly related to your parents. A lot of responsibilities in the home right now. They're putting pressure on your relationship and your partnership, that are asking you maybe not to explore every possibility within your partnership. Grass isn't always greener on the other side, especially with relationships. There's a mutual reception between Mercury and Venus, and from the 6th to the 7th house. There's going to be a review of possibly your health, how you take care of yourself. But that review could lead to some benefits in your relationship. It's important for you, Sagittarius rising, to maintain your integrity in your relationships. This isn't a time to be dishonest with a partner. It will come back and bite you in the butt. So, Sag rising. I've been talking to some Sag rising clients too. And one of the themes that has come up is family responsibilities making them feel stuck, right? Oftentimes the Sagittarius rising wants to keep moving. Their freedom is really important to them. They want to go out and have experiences. They want to move around. And when you have Saturn in an angular house, especially the 4th, there's some things that are keeping you grounded. There's things that are keeping you tied down. So this could be a time when you're feeling kind of tied down, Sag rising. But what I will say is that responsibility that you have is really important. And it's worth it sometimes to allow yourself to be bound. Think about as a saddle or a bridle that's helping to guide the wild horse in a direction that you want to steer it in. And Saturn might be that that saddle or that bridle for you right now, but it might lend you in a direction that is a little bit more, what's the word? Intentional rather than random. Because a lot of times the adventures that Sag risings can go on are kind of like, well, I'm just going to do this random thing now. I'm just going to go do this, and I'm bored. I'm going to go do that. And like Saturn is saying, like pick a direction, pick a goal. The limitations in your environment might be helping you to find purpose. Okay. I'm just reading the chat. Don says they feel like I'm going through a Saturn return for the next 6 years till it finally gets out of Taurus. Don, are you a Sag rising? It says preach, tethered. Like, yeah. The chart never lies, is what I think. You know, it's just really fascinating to see the chart, talk about it with clients and friends and students, make those connections, and then, you know, share those insights. It's really fascinating to see how, like, especially whole sign houses are working. Silent Murmur says, I live where I live, but I feel stuck. Haven't seen a familiar face in 4 years, so it seems like time to move closer to family. What's your rising, Silent Murmur? Dawn is confirming that they are Sag rising. Don't feel like a bad mom, Dawn. I talked to another mother recently, and you're not a bad mom if you feel like you're wanting to move a little bit. You know, like, parenting is fucking hard, okay? Like, it is not, we idealize it in this Cancerian country where we have this vision of perfect parenthood, that every single parent, every single mother and father or whatever, every single person who, you know, has a baby automatically has all these maternal instincts kick in, and then they're just these completely sacrificial animals for their children. It just doesn't work that way. Like, it's normal to feel burnt out by your children. Children can be fucking awful. I'm sorry to be so intense about it, but they are both the most wonderful thing in your life and the most annoying thing in your life, right? And not everybody. There's some of you that are lying, that tell us that your child never does anything that gets on your nerves. But parenting is hard. And when you're used to freedom of movement, when you're used to wanting to create change through your actions, having another being in your life that is requiring you to be more consistent and stable is one of your main sattvas, I will say. You know, one of the things where that sacrifice is worth it, because that little person, I had a client, an awesome client, a really nice client, who had some earthy kids, some earth sign kids, and they were thinking like this, Dawn. And I was talking with them, and I was like, you know, your earth sign kid is going to be really, they're not going to like it if you keep moving around, you know, like that they're going to really suffer for that, and they're going to let you know about it. And they had a chuckle about that. And at the end of the day, kids are resilient, but kids also need some consistency. And I'll also tell you, Sag risings, it's not permanent. They do grow up, and try to be in the moment and enjoy the moment that you're in, because it happens so quickly. They're out of the house so quickly. I have a daughter who's 19, and it just happened, you know? And wow, now I'm like, oh my God, what do I do with myself? Like, it's disorientating. But yeah, it is challenging, but it can be very rewarding if you surrender to it. But also take some time for yourself. You know, there's ways to change little things. Make sure you're exercising, Sag risings, because moving your body can help you to not completely take a nuclear bomb to your life, right? Okay, that can tire yourself out a little bit, is what I would recommend also, if your kids aren't already tiring yourself out there. Krista, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate you. It says, thanks so much for your diligence and grace in talking about the eclipse for all of us. Cheers. Thank you, friend. I appreciate you. Dawn says, you're making me cry and I don't want to, I don't do water. Oh, Dawn, it's okay. My little Scorpio moon daughter tells me we are just here to learn. I love her so much and thank you too. The perspective is grateful. Yes, Dawn, you'll get through it. Parenting is one, like I said, it's one of the hardest things to do in the world. And for those of you who aren't parents, like there are other relationships in your life that you may be bound to that you have to sacrifice for. And at the end of the day, some of those sacrifices are some of the most important things that you can do in your life. In this Western civilization, we have, especially in America, I don't know how many of you in chat are Americans right now, but we have this energy of radical individualism that has permeated this country since its inception, with one small asterisk, unless it's like for your children, you know, like you have to be a radical individualist unless you need to sacrifice everything for your children. You know, it's just such bullshit that we've been fed for our entire lives here in America. But I do think that it is important to sacrifice for our community. I think that your kids are going to appreciate it when they grow up, and just enjoy it. Enjoy what you can, take a break, and don't feel guilty if you fucking hate them every once in a while. Okay, you're not a bad mom. Just be present. Be as present as you can be, and then delegate when you need a break. Thank you, Dawn, so much. I appreciate that super sticker, friend. Silent Murmur says children can demand a lot of time and energy. Absolutely, you are not wrong there, friend. Dawn says, I think it's hard. I think it's what I'm here to heal in my family, but God, it is hard sometimes. Totally, Dawn. Totally. And Ani says, that's why I don't have kids. Oh, Ani, you just rub it in our faces. No, that's fine. Illis J says, kids are just tiny people, no better or worse, meant to be nurtured and protected for the good of them and the collective with what energy is available. Amen, Illis J, for sure. And I'm sure that if you have kids, they are the best dressed capsule wardrobe children on the planet. So I will never forget that contribution that you've made to this channel with the capsule wardrobe. And you're right. They are just tiny people who are trying to figure out how to be human beings on this planet. And it is confusing, and they may get upset because they just have never done this before. They're like, they don't know what the hell's up and down. And life is getting even more confusing. The best thing you can do is just say, I've been here before. Here's what I did to get through this period of time. And I know that the challenges that you have are different. Some of them are going to be similar. Some of my experience is going to be valuable. Other parts of it, as parents, we're just trying to figure this shit out too. You know, welcome to a teenager on the internet and having a phone in, you know, the 2010s. It was like, what do we do here? We don't, this is all new. So give yourself some grace, I think, is what I think we're all trying to tell the parents in the audience and the people who are sacrificing for others, is you got to give yourself some grace. Okay, let's move forward. Sag risings, you gonna hang in there with Saturn in the fourth? And angular Saturn is not fun, friends. I hear you. But this too shall pass. Okay, Capricorn rising. Here we have our last angular house. So Cap risings. Now don't get fooled by the moon being in Taurus here. I'm just moving the eclipse through the houses. So there will be a little bit of funkadoodleness about this. So Cap risings, fourth house eclipse. Big changes in your home, with your parents, with your environment. I know my Cap rising partner has a dad who's going through the beginning stages of Lewy body Alzheimer's. So like, and I tell this story because there's a lot of changes that are coming as far as like how to relate to a father figure. Just feeling a lot of compassion for her right now, having gone through watching a parent decline physically. But Capricorn rising, not everyone's going to have a parent who's aging if you're Cap rising, but you may have some changes with your relationship to your parents. You may have some changes in your home and your domestic situation. Some of those challenges could be coming through partnerships that you have, professional or otherwise. There may be, sources of support that you were have relied on for a long period of time that maybe you're being cut off from. One of the things that we're working through as a couple right now is how do we be present with my partner's dad while he's still coherent enough to be able to interact and enjoy that moment, because it could vanish quickly. It could vanish, take a long time. Alzheimer's is a really cruel disease that just takes things away from you at various intervals. And yeah, I feel for you Cap risings out there. There's something going on in your life your life's always been kind of difficult being a child of Saturn. There's always a burden that you're carrying, but having that burden in your foundation is a little bit difficult. So have some grace with yourself. Take your time. Be present for the people that are in your life, okay, while also delegating responsibilities. Capricorn risings and Capricorns in general are not the greatest delegators in my observations. They want to carry a lot of the burdens. People give them a lot of responsibilities because they show up and they are consistent and they do the hard work, whether they feel like it or not. And that's really valuable. And you Cap risings are really valuable members of the community. Whether you get the acknowledgement for what you do or what you don't do, like you ascend that mountain one step at a time, right? And this eclipse in the 4th, you may have to have some patience with your family, with your home. Maybe there's a new home project that you need to be patient around. And there may be some stress with your partner. I told this story last week, like with Mars and Cancer. I was really feeling aggressive about doing yard work, and my partner had an injury with her neck, and I wasn't as nurturing as I normally would be because I was so hyper focused on getting the work done. For those of you who will want to drag me, I apologize. We figured it all out. Like, we've gotten to a better place with it. Like, I've relaxed and like chilled out, sort of. Like, but there may be some conflict with partnerships and 7th house issues. And yeah, Lynn says, delegate, question mark? Laughing. It's hard to delegate. It is. Because there is a feeling of responsibility that's been ingrained since you were young. A lot of Cap risings are eldest children in their lives, or had a lot of responsibility as a young person, either for siblings or their parents or something like that, where they got thrust into having to be an adult before their time. And they take that responsibility very seriously. And there's beauty in that. I would also say for Cap risings, there's a Capricorn story that always comes to my mind. And it's the story of Precus. Precus is a sea goat that is always trying to turn back time. Like Cher, right? If I could turn back time, I'd wear fishnet stockings on a naval destroyer. Sorry. I'd look like I was 30 at 70. And no, sorry, just go. What a Cher tangent. For those of you who didn't catch that reference there in that video, she is strutting around on a naval warship without pants, singing to Navy officers. If you're too young to catch that reference. But turning back time is an effort to keep the sea goat children from leaving the ocean and losing their ability to think and to speak. So at every point after Precus turns back time, the sea goat children leave. And eventually the Precus is alone and begs his father, Kronos, Saturn, to allow him to die and to go into the stars as a constellation. And he grants that wish. Now that's a little bit of a morbid story, but for you Capricorns, that's Saturn, right? Um, but trying to hold back and turn back time and to keep things the way that they always were is a thing that Cancer and Capricorn share. Capricorn is trying to keep the physical things together, physical structures together. Cancer is feeling this nostalgic for this like imagined world that may or may not have actually happened. You know, like it's they're similar energies. So if you're having an eclipse in your fourth house, there may be some changes happening in your with your parents, with your domestic situation. Try not to get too attached to the clock turning part of it. Recognize that you will have to be vulnerable during this period of time too. Like, when we're going through massive changes in an important area of our life, it is going to require some vulnerability. And it's okay to ask for help every once in a while. You don't have to do it all by yourself, okay? There's a mutual reception with Mercury and Venus over your fifth and your sixth houses. So maybe reevaluating your pleasure-seeking habits can lead to better experience of health. Maybe reevaluating how you meet your responsibilities and the anxiety that you carry around that by calming down and taking it slower and delegating, that can lead to better health, better sleep, all of those things. There might be some pressure from your third house, like with either with siblings or with learning experiences or daily habits that are putting some pressure on the sixth house energy. But I think that Saturn, so there's always unique experiences when we have different planets ruling the ascendant. So like we saw with Scorpio rising, this exile or this fallen Mars is ruling the ascendant. With Aries rising, the Sun is ruling the ascendant there, and so on and so forth. But with Cap rising and Aquarius rising, as we'll talk about next, Saturn is the one that's ruling the chart here. And Saturn's asking you to find meaning in your everyday life. It's asking you to say, what really does bring me meaning in my day-to-day existence, right? And if something isn't bringing you meaning, you have to go off and find what does bring you meaning. So Capricorns are going, and Aquarius risings are going through soul searching right now on some level. Okay. Yes, we've got some Cher fans in the audience. Let's see. Silent Member says it's great that you were able to discuss it. Oh yeah, our domestic conflict. Yes. I don't know. Communication is the key. And sometimes admitting you are wrong is important. Swallowing your pride, Leo risings, me, like, and taking the burden off of your put upon Cap rising partner could lead to a better outcome. And just having patience with the process. I think honestly, our conflict was arising just through burnout and impatience. So it was a good lesson in learning how to relax a little bit and have some fun, and then realizing that the project's still going to be there. You don't have to do it all right away. I think after that experience, my partner and I have been able to find some ways to have some fun together and say, how do we relax a little bit? And that's been really nice the last couple of weeks, is just enjoying each other's company rather than always having to be working on something. So those are great ways to find balance in your life, because oftentimes in a partnership, a long-term partnership, marriage or otherwise, you can get into a rut of like just having to take care of all your responsibilities, especially in middle age. If you're a parent or a homeowner or whatever, it's just this grind of like, oh, this needs fixing. Little Billy has to be taken to soccer practice. Oh, we have to do this. And, oh, we have to figure this thing out with our aging parents. And it's just a grind. And finding ways to enjoy each other's company, like when you first met, like date night or something, can be really healthy and really healing. And then that can give you more energy for doing the other things that are important in your life. And that could be part of this story too, Cap rising. Michelle says, Rachel says, share. Yes, share. Says, hard for me to ask for help. I'm assuming you're Cap rising, Michelle. I think you are. I'm trying to save money and buy a home. Tired of renting. Oh, amen, Michelle. I rented for 20 plus years, and it is really tough to get out of that cycle. We had a very opportune moment to be able to purchase the home that we lived in that we rented for many years, and it's difficult owning the home too. I will say it is. We bought the home at the top of the market when it was really expensive, but we wanted to stay in this house, and the house has been sold like 4 times since we lived here, and every time like it just got more and more expensive, and we were afraid that we were going to get kicked out of our house if we didn't move heaven and earth to stay and to buy it ourselves. So I wish you luck with that, Michelle. Like, save money. Hopefully the market shifts, and that you get the home of your dreams, because just stick with it. Sometimes it happens early on in our lives, and sometimes it happens later, and sometimes that's not everyone's dream. I know that's the part of the American dream, but not everybody has the same dream, and sometimes that gives you the freedom to move around a little bit too, because it's a lot of responsibility owning a home. It's not as fun as I thought it would be. Like, Ani says, love Cher, epic and provocative performance. Yes. Illis J says, oh, Cher, Mom, I am a rich man. Oh, funny. If I could turn back time, if I could only turn back time in a thong and fishnets. Yeah, right. There you go. Legendary. Lynn says, glad for my 9th house placements right now. Always really. Yes. Well, that gives you perspective, right? Krista says, y'all went through that ice storm. Give yourself some credit. Yeah, Krista. Yeah, we did. We went through it's been some real challenging times lately with the, holy fuck, yeah. The whole like a week without power. It's like, that'll test anybody's relationship. So, you're absolutely right. Just having grace with one another, super important. Okay, Cap Rising. Do you feel seen? Let's move forward. Aquarius Rising. So Aquarius Rising, the eclipse is happening for you in the 3rd house of daily habits, routines, siblings, extended family, new learning processes, communication. All of those things are themes that we talk about with the 3rd house. And it is being provided resources from the 6th house with Mars in Cancer there. So there may be some things you may have I bet Aquarius risings right now are going through some health problems. Maybe there's a feeling of being burnt out or something like that. Like, you just had Pluto moving into your 1st house, where if you are having some kind of injury or illness, it's going to really force you to change your habits. It's going to help you to evaluate what you're doing on a day-to-day basis that is maybe leading to some of these things. You just went through Saturn in the 1st house, so you probably had a lot of changes with your body and how you relate to that. And now Saturn is in aversion to the 1st, so it's hard to get resources from Saturn right now. Saturn is putting the focus on your finances, and then it's also putting pressure on Venus in your 5th house. So Aquarius risings are probably going through some stuff right now where they're like, I got to get real about how I spend my money. I might not be able to explore as many avenues of entertainment that bring me pleasure as I would like to. There's probably some Aquarius risings out there right now. They're probably going through getting sober. I think that this Saturn in an overcoming square to Venus in the 5th is a great time for sobriety and things like that also. Mercury and Venus are in a mutual reception from the 4th and the 5th. So reevaluating how you relate to your family and your home and your domestic situation, and again, your daily habits and routines. Mercury in the 2nd decan of Taurus is really about nurturing something regularly. So when Mercury is retrograding in Taurus 2, you got to say, what is our routine? Is this working? Is this not? Are we giving and receiving in a way that's healthy? How can I bust out of this rut that I'm in? So that can be helpful with Aquarius rising. Aquarius rising also has Pluto that just moved into your 1st house. So you all are going through some much more long-term changes, and you're probably starting to get a little bit of an inkling of what that's going to mean for you moving forward. It's probably not super loud yet. It takes a while, and Pluto will retrograde back into Capricorn for the remainder of this year, sometime in the next few months here, and then it'll move into Aquarius for good in January. So just take your time with the changes that you're going through. You don't have to make them all at once. Pluto may just be revealing some of the things that you've pushed down and repressed, and it might be a longer term journey to make those changes over time. Okay. Let's finish this up with Pisces rising. And you Pisces risings have been so patient. You've been so patient, Pisces rising. Thank you for sticking with us today. So Pisces rising has the eclipse in the third house. No, not the third house. Jesus. This is in the second house. It looks like the third house. I'm going to go all the way back around and see if it puts it back in there. There we go. So the eclipse is in the third house for Pisces rising. So, geez. Can you tell it's the end of the show where Spencer's blood sugar is starting to plummet? Luckily, you Pisces risings are very forgiving of this type of thing. So, second house eclipse. Finances, resources, how you support yourself versus how you get support from other people. If we extend that kind of a sobriety test, Saturn in the first house is another good test of like, are you going to let go of habits that aren't serving you and your body anymore? Mars is possibly cutting you off from sources of entertainment. There may be some challenges with your kids. If you're a Pisces rising, also some conflict around that. There may be some new ways that you're going to have to go out and make some money, or enlist a following. There is a mutual reception between Mercury and Venus in your third and your fourth house. Mercury is going to retrograde in your third house. So again, evaluating your daily habits, evaluating your learning processes. You may have to go back to school to learn something, but that learning could really have a positive effect on your home life. Venus is moving through your fourth house, trying to give you some grace and some beauty and some peace within your domestic situation, despite Mars moving through your fifth. So maybe have a good conversation with your folks if they're still around, your parents, your siblings, or something like that. Clear the air with them, or you might not be able to explore as much as you want as far as like making changes within your home right now. There may be an attraction to like living somewhere else or making a bunch of redecorating changes, but Saturn is in the overcoming square and saying, be realistic. Is that dream realistic? This is a tough position to have Saturn angular for a Pisces type person. Generally, the dream is more fun than the reality of the dream. So give yourself some grace and take your time with this process as well. All right, friends, we're around the 3-hour mark. I think that is what I've got for you as far as taking things through the houses. I hope that you enjoyed that. I am going to do a couple more things before we wrap for the day. But thank you so much for being here. Just a couple other notes before I talk about the animal and the I-Ching. The first quarter part of this, I'm going to pull the chart up just for one more second. Just if you're curious. The first quarter part of this is going to happen on the 27th. Okay, so there is the full moon. If we go back in time to the first quarter, here's the first quarter moon at about 7 degrees of Taurus and Leo. So there may be a challenge around feelings of scarcity that come up, especially when the sun hits Pluto in a square. There may be some things that are outside of our control that make us really feel like we have to get moving all right, that are like, oh no, I'm going to be poor if I don't deal with this type of issue. So again, try not to fall prey to too much fear around lack. And then this is for everyone with the first quarter moon. And then it might be, you might need to compete a little bit with the moon in the first decan of Leo, where you may have to like recognize that if you're going to support yourself, you got to get out there. You got to embrace a little bit of competition every once in a while. You got to advocate for yourself. You got to get into that spotlight a little bit. Okay. Ani says, I have a conflict during a live cast on Friday, but I'll drop in at the end and catch the replay. I can't wait to catch up on the episode. Oh, thank you, Ani. I know it's not, the time doesn't work for everyone, but I appreciate people who are listening after the fact as well. Okay, so that's the first quarter, and then we're getting to the May 5th date, where we have the full moon lunar eclipse, and I'll do another live stream with the full moon lunar eclipse. But this one, the moon's not in a great position. That's the sun's in the decan that Mercury is retrograding in. So any Mercury retrograde issues, sun will bring clarity to that. And then the moon is in a decan that's associated with like deep emotional bonding with others. So there may be an ending of some kind of deeply enmeshed relationship potentially around this period of time. There may be some changes around that. And there may be a need to let go of something that we've been deeply bonded with. Or you may have to revisit a relationship that has been deeply bonded to learn something, to distill the essence of that and then finally let it go. Try not to get lost in the nostalgia of that relationship with the moon in the second decan of Scorpio. That decan is related to the Six of Cups. So if you have any familiarity with the tarot, some of those themes will be called into question potentially. Okay, so that is what I have on the astrology. So the hexagram that I got for you was hexagram number 20, which translates to viewing, observation, contemplation, serving as an example, taking an overview, self-examination, inner clarity that leads to a successful action in the world. So again, we're going to be infusing purpose into a body at this new moon, but also with this eclipse. We're going to be shutting off the ego, maybe shutting off our self-interest to be able to build bridges with Al-Resha to our community members and get people on board with our vision. Line number 2 is changing. Line number 2 and 6 are changing. Line number 2 says viewing furtively from behind the door, which sounds very Mars and Cancer, doesn't it? This is beneficial for the perseverance of a woman. Now, this is in reference to the antiquated ancient Chinese culture where they would keep women kind of in the home. So the way that we update that for our modern sensibility and our Western civilization is that that was maybe a good thing back then for them, quote unquote, but that limited viewpoint may be detrimental in modern society. We don't want to only be viewing things from our limited domestic perspective. We need to see which is our personal perspective. So we have to try to see things from a larger perspective. We have to try to not just understand how things affect you personally, expand your sphere of concern. Look outside yourself for meaning. We don't want to be willfully ignorant, I guess I would say. We don't want to only see what is right in front of us within our little safe spaces. We have to kind of venture outside the safe space a little bit. Line number 6 says, viewing his life, the superior person is without blame. So being able to view your life liberated from our egos, liberated from the desire of only personal gratification. So this can help you to let go of your excessive self-interest, excessive ambition, which will grant you new freedom. It specifically says here that this grants new freedom. So the ability to do right, to do the right thing, benefit, whether it benefits you personally or not. And again, that's going to help you create beneficial communities, healthy communities. Healthy communities are the only way we can have healthy individuals. Well, let me repeat that. Healthy communities are the only thing that can support healthy individuals. So as within, so without, as above, so below, as individual, so community. Healthy individuals are the only ones that can create healthy communities. So it works both ways. There is an exchange between a healthy individual and a healthy community. So I do think there are times where we really do have to work on ourselves, and there's certain things that are out of our control that we just have to accept. And that's what we have the power to do. There are other times where we have to really pay attention to our communities and say, is our community healthy? Is there even the conditions to be able to support our individuals? And I think we're at one of those moments where to be able to continue to move forward as healthy individuals, we do have to figure out how our contribution fits in with the greater good and the greater whole. So that's changing to hexagram number 29, which translates to the abyss, water, darkness, danger, despair, courage, and devotion, maintaining faith, pushing through the rapids and cutting and getting through to the other side. Oftentimes eclipses are disorientating. Remember, the light of the sun, the clarity of the sun is cut off by the moon, by our bodies, by our emotional nature, by our instincts. So this is a time to get in touch with your instincts. But again, we may not know where we're going. There's darkness involved. There's literal darkness with an eclipse. So when you're in those periods, it's important to take your time. It's important to not rush into things. It's important to let the process unfold. It's important to recognize that during the liminal space and the Bardo period in between eclipses, lots of things are up in the air. It's a reset. It's a re-evaluation of what is important to us and how we structure our lives. So we can feel like we're swimming around in a dark lake where we don't know where we're going. So that's a vulnerable space. That's why it's dangerous. Take your time, live into the answers, rely on your communities for support without having it be an expectation, I guess, also. Okay. We don't want to get codependent, but we want to be interdependent. And thank you, Julene, for the super sticker. I appreciate you. The crab was our animal. And how ironic, or not, how fortuitous or synchronous, having Mars and Cancer hosting this. We talked a lot about Cancer and the crab today. But the crab was the animal that I pulled. And the crab represents rejuvenation, transformation. It grows within the shell and it eventually molts the shell. This might be a molting phase. This eclipse is a molting and it leaves us vulnerable. So we may lose an appendage here and there as a crab, but crabs have the ability to regrow their appendages. So what you lose can be regrown in a different form. It might not be as big of a loss as you think. It may be really important for your emotional growth, for your independence. We may have to practice self-preservation within reason at this eclipse as well. Again, I say within reason because we don't want to get so paranoid that we're completely cut off from life. But this is an animal that has the ability to shift directions very quickly. They can move sideways, they can move backwards, they can move forwards. They're very fast. If you've ever seen a crab on the beach, especially those little ghost crabs, I spent some time in the Florida Keys in the past, and there's these little ghost crabs that just like scurry. You see them and then you don't. And that's a defense mechanism, right? So if you've gotten involved in something that isn't in alignment with your integrity, maybe it's okay to back out, right? Maybe it's okay to wait and go sideways or be flexible or be adaptable. Cancer is a very adaptable creature or sign. And the moon is all about learning how to go with the flow and go with the phases of your life. So pay attention to the direction that the tide is going. Try not to hold on too tightly to the things that brought you security at one time in your life, because everything is changing. Those sands are shifting with the tides, and you have to become in alignment with the current if you want to survive. If you try to hang on while the tide has gone out, you are in a vulnerable position. But if you know that you can ride the tide and then it'll come back in again, just like the rhythm of the moon, That'll keep you in the space that you want to be. All right, friends. That is what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with me here today. Happy eclipse season. Take your time. Try to relax. Practice that good self-care. Practice the care of others as well. I thank you so much for your attention and your time today and your contributions. Please do me a huge favor. Like this video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel and the newsletter. I hope that I can see some of you in the guided group study that starts Monday, the 17th. Again, if you need help, reach out. I'll be happy to set up some kind of payment plan if you need help with that, or if you're going through a challenge at this moment. I just love being able to meet up with all of you. So that's what I've got for you today. Thanks for all your amazing comments, and I will probably see you next week. And maybe Monday if I see some of you. So again, be kind to yourself, especially during eclipse season. Be kind to one another during eclipse season. Don't take anything for granted. Practice gratitude, and we'll see you the next time. All right, friends. Take care.